This is 2 hours of every canon Pokemon ship between Pokemon Protagonists from a Pokemon story that you may not know about, but I guarantee you that these are some of the best Pokemon stories you'll ever witness. And to kick things off, we're going to be taking a look at Pokemon's greatest love story ever, and then taking a look at 3 other love stories that all have very different outcomes.
I love you. 3 words that you never thought you would hear from anyone in Pokemon, but 3 words that were said in the greatest iteration of the Gen 3 story, Pokemon Adventures Ruby and Sapphire. A story that's not just Pokemon's greatest canon love story, but a story that you've seen beyond anything that you've seen in the anime or the games, as it's filled with emotion, despair, hope, and so much more. So if you haven't read the manga yet, this is a major spoiler warning, and a warning to be prepared to be blown away by a story so good, it puts almost every other story in Pokemon along with its characters to shame. And before anyone says anything about me shipping 10-year-olds, I'm not. This is the message from the author from the first volume, so you're welcome, it's canon. Let's start off by going over our 2 protagonists. Unlike previous Adventures arcs, Adventures Ruby and Sapphire start off by building up our male and female protagonists, Ruby and Sapphire, in parallel, and the story follows both of them at the same time. However, unlike the previous male protagonists who led the stories prior, Ruby isn't anything like Red or Gold. Red and Gold were typical outgoing, brave, and kind heroes that you would expect to see in any Pokemon title or shonen anime, like Ash basically. Ruby isn't anything like this at all. Ruby is incredibly selfish, arrogant, posh, cares heavily about appearances, snarky, annoying, and incredibly fussy. And that's not the main thing that sets him apart from the previous protagonists. The main thing that sets him apart from the previous 2 was the same thing that made me hesitant on reading this manga as a kid. Ruby's goal is not to defeat the gym leaders and become the very best. It's to win every single Pokemon contest in Hoenn. Yep, his dream is to become a master coordinator. And I know many of you may be in my position of wondering how having protagonists aspiring to win contests can be any fun to read, but you gotta trust me on this one. It'll get really good later on. Sapphire, on the other hand, is unlike the previous female protagonists and is the complete opposite of Ruby. This might be the outfit you see her in throughout the manga, but when you first see her, she's dressed like this. Sapphire is wild, adventurous, tomboyish, intuitive, incredibly athletic, and loves to battle. And the gym leader challenge in this manga is taken up by her. So starting things off, we have a more feminine male protagonist who's into contests, beauty, and enhancing one's looks with man-made products, while the other is into gym challenges, battles, and keeping everything in its natural wild state. Sound familiar to anything? With introductions out of the way, let's get on to the main story.
But you know what else I love? Blastoise. Because Blastoise is a hybrid between Tortoise and Cannons, hence the name HybridHero. But you want to know some other turtles that are heroes? The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, baby. And they got a crazy collab that I'm excited to show you. Because this game is about to go bonkers, especially because till October 30th, you can get Michelangelo, the funniest of the 4 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, for just logging in for 7 days from now. October 30th will be the last day to begin the chase to unlock Michelangelo for free. And trust me, you don't want to miss this, as this will give you a fantastic head start in this game. And who doesn't love Mikey? Especially because in this game, he taunts enemies with trash talk. That's truly cowabunga. That's not all though. Since Raid Shadow Legends is partnering up with Paramount to bring one of the craziest crossovers ever, you'll also be able to obtain Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, April, and Shredder as legendary champions alongside the previously mentioned Michelangelo. So you can live out all your childhood TMNT fantasies. I've always been a Leo guy myself. I love blue and the swords. I even sort of had a TMNT inspired Squirtle avatar on the channel way back in the day. But let me know which Ninja Turtle you're a fan of. You can fuse Donatello, a top support who heals allies and reduces cooldowns. Also, you can summon Leonardo, Raphael, April, and Shredder through limited time events, as well as challenge Shredder in the event dungeon to earn the exclusive chronograph gear set. And if this wasn't crazy enough, by collecting all 6 of the champions from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle squad, players can unlock a special bonus reward that's better than pizza. So be sure to download the game by using the link in the description down below or by scanning my QR code. Thanks to Plarium for sponsoring this video, and a special thanks to Paramount.
Our story begins with Ruby moving into Littleroot Town from Johto on his birthday, with Norman eagerly awaiting his family's arrival in Hoenn, but Ruby has other plans. Fearing that his father will push him into rigorous training and disapprove of his dream to win all contests in Hoenn, Ruby runs away immediately. While escaping, Ruby encounters Professor Birch being attacked by Mightyena. Ruby tries to help, but his Pokemon are trained for style, not battle. He manages to scare the Mightyena off, but it leads him off a cliff. He's saved by what he thinks is a wild Pokemon, but it turns out to be Sapphire. Startled, Ruby attacks her, leading into a misunderstanding. Ruby, thinking he's under attack, contacts Birch, who instructs him to use Mudkip from his bag. However, Ruby's disgusted by Mudkip's appearance, which says a lot about him, even saying ew to him, but anyways, the guy prefers not to battle at all. Meanwhile, Sapphire aggressively fights back and gets frustrated by Ruby's hesitation. Eventually, Birch realizes that Ruby is fighting Sapphire and clears up the confusion. Birch also recognizes Ruby as Norman's son, but doesn't mention anything about their shared past, which, I mean, you'll see why this would have been incredibly useful later. Just as the misunderstanding clears up, they're attacked by a Waltz Viper. Sapphire explains that she's helping her father with Pokemon research, hence a remote secret base, and kind of explains why she's dressed the way she is. She asks for Ruby's help, and you would think in a situation like this, the guy would help, but no. He refuses, worrying that battling would ruin his Pokemon for contests. What a freaking guy, eh? Sapphire handles the Viper herself and expresses her dislike for Pokemon that can't battle, emphasizing her belief in keeping things natural, in contrast to Ruby's focus on enhancing Pokemon through artificial methods. In frustration, Sapphire proposes an 80-day bet. She'll defeat all 8 gym leaders, while Ruby will have to win all 20 contests, with the winner meeting at her secret base in 80 days. Ruby agrees to the bet, but Sapphire suddenly faints. Ruby realizes she protected him from the Mighty's attack earlier and tends to her. While she's unconscious, the Viper returns and Ruby swiftly defeats it and heads out to pursue his 80-day challenge. So clearly, Ruby isn't actually against battling, because he just did it and presumably got his Pokemon a bit dirty, but he didn't want to battle in front of Sapphire. It's interesting. As Sapphire wakes up, she realizes she's all healed thanks to Ruby, and even better than that, Ruby left her a very Ruby-like letter telling her that he altered his clothes for her to wear and that they look great on her. How sweet. Except she's totally embarrassed because he definitely took her measurements while she was asleep. Well, anywho, Sapphire regains her composure and sets off on her challenge as well. The two go their separate ways and only meet here and there, and throughout this challenge, I want you guys to know, Sapphire was straight up destroying Ruby. She literally obtained 4 gym badges before he could win any contests. Now, that was primarily because the normal rank contests come up so late in the Hoenn region, but regardless, she was crushing him. But the real progress that happens in between here isn't in their actual challenges, it's in their growth as characters throughout the challenge. If I haven't made it any more clear by now, the dual protagonists work perfectly because not only do they parallel each other, but they also parallel Team Magma and Team Aqua. Team Magma and Team Aqua are of course present here in the manga, and it's Ruby that has to primarily deal with Team Magma, and Sapphire who has to primarily deal with Team Aqua. This is interesting because Team Aqua, of course, is all about taking the world into a more natural state for Pokemon, and Team Magma is all about enhancing the world and its land for humans, which Ruby and Sapphire exemplify in their own characters in a smaller way. So in a way, it's like they're going up against their own characteristics and values throughout the series. Other things to mention is that Ruby in particular is shown to battle when no one else is around to see him. His battling skills are on par with Sapphire's, but why he's hiding it, we don't know yet. He also does help people when he can, but to not hurt others, he sometimes helps them by pushing them away, and that actually ends up hurting them in the process. Yeah, his character is a lot more complex. Sapphire, on the other hand, almost seems like a perfect character in the first half of the manga, succeeding in almost everything she does and even having superhuman feats. She even held her breath for friggin' 4 minutes while saving Flannery and battling. Her development in the story comes more so from accepting Ruby and the growth of her feelings towards him, because as early as Dewford Town, she's embarrassed and denying the fact that she likes him and all. Her development is in becoming more vulnerable in her own way. So you have a feminine male protagonist who's becoming a bit more masculine, and a masculine female protagonist who's becoming a bit more feminine, like two opposites coming together in harmony. Throughout their time together, it's clear that the two really care for each other, and while it's shown that they can't stand one another, through and through, they're always looking out for each other, and when they work together, they work really well as a team. The second half of the story revolves around the events of Groudon and Kyogre. Yeah, the two legends fought for the entirety of the latter half of the series, and boy was it reckless. In this, all the gym leaders teamed up to fight Groudon and Kyogre and save the Hoenn region, and they called upon Sapphire to help as well, because Winona is their master and Winona is the greatest, and Winona went, yeah, we need Sapphire, and boom. Gym leader tier already, baby, she's crazy. It's here that Sapphire runs into Ruby and actually softens up around him. She starts to be nice to him, and it even looks like she's gonna confess at some point, but the Legend's Earthquake causes them to get attacked by a dozen wild Grumpig, and Ruby instinctively attacks and subsides all of them in order to protect him and Sapphire. Sapphire realizes his strength and gets upset at him for hiding his battling prowess this entire time, and asks him to help in the fight to save Hoenn. And of course, Ruby says no. He wants to continue doing contests even during the crisis, and once he's done, he wants to head back to the Johto region, and that he basically says that he doesn't care about Hoenn. Sapphire is outraged and heartbroken, because while Ruby doesn't know it yet, Sapphire doesn't want Ruby to leave Hoenn. She really has grown to love him, and of course, she's appalled by how selfish Ruby can be, with everyone's lives at stake as well. So in her fury, she abandons the clothes that Ruby got her. Now, you may think that Ruby was just saying all this for show, but no, he actually meant it. Yeah, he's sad and all because he knows he's hurt and disappointed Sapphire, but he goes on to do the contest anyways, in the middle of the region falling apart. Now, I can't go into all the details here, but eventually his Master Wallace and one of Ruby's own Pokemon come in and teach Ruby a lesson that he'll never forget about how selfish he's been and how he's hurt the people around him. And this gets Ruby to stand back up and actually protect the things that he cares for. His Pokemon, all the people he's met, the Hoenn region, and of course, Sapphire. He learns to accept the battling side of his character and moves forward to stop Groudon and Kyogre, and upon seeing her again, he even makes her a new set of clothes for both him and her, and Sapphire slowly starts to warm up to him again. Ruby and Sapphire team up to fight Archie and Maxie, who, consumed by the red and blue orbs, have lost their humanity. While it's hard to say if Ruby and Sapphire truly won, they accomplished their goal of stopping the two. After an explosive finish, the orbs leave Archie and Maxie, entering Ruby and Sapphire's bodies. Luckily, they land on Mirage Island to train their bodies and minds for a quick training arc, balancing their weaknesses and strengths to control the orbs. Archie and Maxie personify the path that Ruby and Sapphire could have taken had they stuck with their extreme ideals, representing how their extreme differences drove them apart, and how with their extremes, they're always in conflict with the rest of the world. Ruby and Sapphire avoid this fate by finding balance within themselves and with each other. I feel as though that the path they were heading towards was the same path of Archie and Maxie, like literally they were fighting the worst version of themselves, and I think it's because of their similarities that the red and blue orb chose them. But of course, like I said, with the balance came the control over the orbs, allowing them to retain their humanity and take a better path. Groudon and Kyogre are still going on the rampage, and right before Ruby and Sapphire are about to confront them, Sapphire says that she has something that she needs to say to Ruby, and tells him that she loves him. Well, if you're reading the stupid Viz Media translation, she actually tells him that she has a crush on him, but that's dumb, and the actual translation nails it down to I love you. Ruby is shocked, and Sapphire apologizes, saying that she only said it now because she doesn't know when she'll get a chance to say it ever again. Not only because they might not make it out alive, but because Ruby said he'd head back to Johto. It's here that we learn about the backstories of the two characters. Sapphire reflects on having feelings for someone else as well ever since she was a kid. A friend that she met when her father was visiting one of his friends who happened to have a son around her age. This friend of hers from way back when that she only spent a little time with was one that she forgot the name of and face of due to how long it's been, but this was the person that she had the best time of her life with. On top of this, she mentions that the same friend had protected her from being attacked by salamence way back when. Ruby is shocked to hear this because he realizes that she of course is referring to him, and that he also has had feelings for her this entire time without realizing that she was his childhood friend. Ruby and Sapphire were childhood lovers from the early days. Sapphire was a timid girly girl and Ruby was everything you'd expect from a guy. One day as they were playing, a salamence attacked them and Ruby did everything he could to protect Sapphire. In that, Sapphire didn't see salamence as the monster, but Ruby as the monster. Ruby had realized that his battle-hungry nature scared her friend that he was trying to protect, and Sapphire realized that her weakness caused her to hurt a friend who was only trying to protect her. And so, Ruby vowed that he would pursue beauty over power, and Sapphire vowed that she would pursue power over beauty. They essentially became each other, but denied a huge part of themselves in the process, and in accepting one another, they slowly began to accept themselves as well. Ruby, not wanting the love of his life to get hurt, pushes Sapphire off of Atropius to fight Groudon and Kyogre himself. Well, him and side chick Courtney go together, but he's doing it for Sapphire. Eventually, at the cost of lives, Ruby does stop Groudon and Kyogre, but Archie and Maxie return, and of course, Sapphire finds a way to return to him and save him, and the two fight Archie and Maxie together for one final fight, which in my eyes was the final piece needed to show that the two had truly grown, as this time, they successfully beat Archie and Maxie without fail. And how could I forget? As the series ends and the 80-day bet comes to a close, we find out that the reason why Sapphire created the 80-day bet in the first place was because 80 days from the day she met Ruby was her birthday, and if you remember, the bet started off on Ruby's birthday. Adventures Ruby and Sapphire, everyone. Even crazier is if you look at the gemstone for July and September respectively, you'll see that the actual gemstones for the two are Ruby and Sapphire. It's nuts how they tied everything in together. I never even went over the fact as to how Wallace is Ruby's master and Winona is Sapphire's master, and Winona and Wallace in this series have a history together. Ruby and Sapphire have so many parallels, so many connections, and so many things that just make their story so incredible for the likes of Pokemon. While I do wish they had more time together, their story about opposites coming together in harmony with each other is a classic tale, and their character growth as friends, as a couple, and as individuals are some of the best in the entirety of Pokemon, and this love story just has to be Pokemon's best without fail. I know I kinda went over the entirety of their relationship here in this video, but trust me, if you were to pick up and read the manga, even knowing all of this, you will thoroughly enjoy the series and these characters. I didn't tell you what happens afterwards now, did I? How Ruby takes the confession and what happens to them afterwards. Well, I guess you guys can read for yourselves to find out, or we do have the Emerald and Aura as chapters to cover, so maybe I'll touch upon them again some other time. But for now, we got a lot more to cover on the Ruby and Sapphire chapters themselves.
This month, the game went pretty freaking crazy with its giveaways. If you haven't signed up yet, then let me sweeten the deal by giving you a ton of new bonuses for clicking my link in the description down below, or for scanning my QR code. The first thing is that you'll immediately get a huge starter pack with the legendary champion Groudon, as well as 3 other epic champions: Epic Ugo after reaching level 10, Epic Vergus after reaching level 20, and Epic Talgar after reaching level 30. New players can also pick from one of 4 legendaries using the following promo codes: Sun Wukong with promo code Monkey King, Alice the Wanderer with promo code Get Alice, Green Wanderer Rurik with the promo code Tree Hugger, or Tuanarok with promo code Desert Queen. The promo code as well as the date of expiration for each promo will be on screen, but I'd personally go with Sun Wukong cause, you know, Infernape gang. Sun Wukong also just looks pretty freaking cool. Once again, this is a limited time offer that will give you a great start within the game. So download the game with my link and play Raid Shadow Legends today. ... Maybe the only words you know of this man, this boy known to be a prodigy. You may have thought that he had no other passion outside of Pokemon battles, but when the passion of the heart arises, even he falls victim to it, because Red himself has also once fallen in love. Well, sorta. Someone else fell in love to get him to fall in love, if you know what I mean. So let's dive into this romance that you never heard of. In the games, Red is obviously a silent protagonist, someone who we play as and save the day through. The guy doesn't say much, if anything at all, and there's no major character who actually shows any interest in him and vice versa. This is shown in the Gen 1 and 2 games and the remakes, but with the addition of Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, there was someone new who came into the picture: Green. Prior to these games, Green was just a playable character known as Leaf in Fire Red and Leaf Green. Due to Red being the canonical player character, she didn't even get a chance to appear in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. This is the first known time where they both existed in the same game universe, but they didn't interact. However, they did interact in Masters, where there were some instances of them having conversations that might seem as if they're slightly interested in each other, or even seeming close enough that they would be together, but nothing too crazy at all. That's where the Pokemon Adventures manga comes in, because in the manga, those two have some spicy manga panels. Except, this isn't the girl he's actually in love with. Leaf or Green might be who most of you are expecting to be his love interest, because it's the only notable female for him in the games. But there's another girl involved who's not a part of the games. Am I saying there's nothing between Leaf and Red? No, there definitely are things we can talk about, but if you know anything about the Pokemon Adventures manga, you know Green is second fiddle. And no, I'm not talking about Blue. I'm talking about the manga exclusive character, Yellow. Let's do a breakdown of Red and Yellow's romantic history with each other and talk about what makes this pairing so special. The shipping is known as special shipping if you didn't catch the joke. I gotta give a shout out to I Need My Tea from Poke Amino for compiling all the special shipping moments together. For those unaware, the Pokemon Adventures manga comes in volumes corresponding to the game's titles. The first few volumes are named after Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green. Then we have Yellow, followed by Gold, Silver, and Crystal, and so on and so forth. Each title shifts the story's focus to different parts and characters, with the titles often reflecting the protagonist's names. In the Red volumes, the main focus is on Red. While Blue is introduced in the Red volume, when the story moves towards the Blue chapters, Red remains the main focus, but Blue gains more prominence. The Green chapters introduce Green as a character, corresponding to the female character seen in the concept art for the games. Now you cover the rival, the player character, and the female character. And again, as seen in the concept art, all 3 of them were made for the games. But now we have Pokemon Yellow coming out as a game. So what do you do for a character here? Story and spoiler time, lads. While I highly recommend you read the manga, as it's pretty different from the games and the anime, it still follows the same basic story, just way cooler, so the actual details are more important than the actual plot, so by watching this video you can still enjoy the details of the Adventures manga when you read it on your own time. But in the Red, Blue, Green manga, to sum it up very quickly, Red meets Blue and Green throughout his adventures, and each of them become a Pokédex holder in their own way. Together, they defeat an insane version of Team Rocket, and Red eventually becomes the league champion. Before Red beats Giovanni and becomes a champion, they're set up for the Yellow Saga. Near the end of his journey in the 3rd volume, Red is walking into Viridian Forest when a younger girl is suddenly attacked by a wild Dratini. Red protects and saves her, showing care and concern, and helps her catch her first Pokemon, a Rattata. Okay, I know it's just a Rattata, but it's a special Rattata, because Red teaches her that Pokemon will always be our friends if you care for them with a loving heart. Who is this girl, you might ask? Well, it's Yellow, of course, though Red doesn't know that yet. After defeating Giovanni and passing out, Yellow is by his side when he regains consciousness. Red needs to advance to the Pokemon League, but Yellow doesn't want him to leave, suggesting that they need a new Viridian City gym leader to try and make him stay. Red explains that he has things to do, but promises to return as the best gym leader there ever was, once he's achieved more. After beating the Pokemon League, Red went missing for 2 years, only for him to be discovered nearly dead and trapped in ice. Before this revelation, Yellow disguised as a boy for some reason, and Red's Pikachu, Pika, went on a mission to find him. Red's Pokemon are trapped in ice with him, except for Pikachu, who found its way to Yellow and teamed up with her because, you know, Pikachu thinks it just stays outside the Pokeball. And throughout this time, Yellow showed multiple signs of having feelings for Red. When Green told Yellow that Red was missing, she was shocked and immediately was willing to find him. She blushed when she thought she saw him and was determined to train with Blue to save him. Yellow smiled at the thought of teaming up with Red and got so angry upon seeing him trapped in ice that Blaine had to restrain her and was tearfully calling out for him, ignoring Blaine's warning about a torrent coming right at her. When Red was freed from the ice, he saw a drawing of himself in Yellow's sketchbook and was shocked. After Yellow defeated Lance and fell unconscious, she woke up in Red's arms on his Gyarados, blushing. Red commended her effort and noticed her Butterfree string shot wrapped around their pinkies like lovers, making Yellow freak out. Red even suggested that they live together, causing her to blush again. However, Red didn't realize that Yellow was the same girl that he saved earlier. And heck, he didn't even know Yellow was a girl, making the love entirely one-sided on Yellow's part. By the 7th volume, Red still doesn't know Yellow's a girl, let alone the same girl from back then, alright? He's completely oblivious. Classic happy-go-lucky, stupid anime brain protagonist brain, you know what I'm talking about? But you know what's not stupid? Hitting that subscribe button to see some more manga shipping content from Pokemon Adventures. Come on, I need to know if you guys want to see me talk about Ruby and Sapphire. While Red is recovering in the Gold and Silver chapters, Yellow and Daisy Oak help Red out, and at one point Daisy asks Yellow if she told Red about her gender, and she just blushes and ignores it, focusing on helping Red. Red actually pushes his health a bit because he wants to take the test to become the Viridian City gym leader. Whether this is because he remembers his promise to the little girl who's yellow or just simply, we don't know, but I want to say it's due to the promise. That adds to the fun here. But throughout the test, Yellow is constantly shown to be concerned, and later on during the final battle of the manga in the Crystal Saga, which I don't know how to show this off without spoiling some cool scenes because it is the final battle, and this battle isn't in the games, but we'll try not to show off too much, Yellow's identity of being a girl is finally revealed to Red, and boy is he shocked. Kinda gets over it quickly because of the situation they're all in, but trust me, the shock would have lasted longer if they weren't in such a dire situation. More than that, after the final battle, Red gets an accidental call from Misty, and you wouldn't believe it, Yellow is straight up jealous and trying to snoop around and make sure nothing funny is happening because, get this, Misty also has an interest in Red. Yeah, this guy has all the ladies of the Adventures manga, but unlike Ash's hypothetical situations, Red actually faces these situations. Anyways, Green catches on to this and says another battle looks like it's going to take place, and in a very loud voice, to tease Red, Yellow, and Misty, she tells them that if they're confused, then maybe they should all just live together, which is a callback and a tease to what Red said to Yellow without realizing that she's a girl. Another thing to note is that since returning Red's Pikachu to him, Yellow got her own Pikachu, and in the Gold, Silver, and Crystal chapters, Red's Pikachu and Yellow's Pikachu did the deed, had an egg, which Gold received, hatched into Pichu. Some believe this signifies the trainers' future feelings for each other, while others disagree. But I'm personally on the camp that agrees, because, you know, why not? Another moment is when Yellow and Mewtwo are being transported by Deoxys and Yellow's fishing line catches Red's finger, echoing Caterpie's string shot from the Yellow Saga. Later, Blue and Green find Yellow asleep, thinking about Red. She firmly believes that Red will keep his promises and return to her, even though Blue took over for him there, but still, she still trusts him wholeheartedly, which I really respect. In a cinematic battle in the Emerald Saga of the manga, some Pokedex holders are turned to stone, and Yellow is held in Red's arms, which, you know, in a kid's series, this is pretty telling of romance. There's a happy ending to this fight, but I don't want to spoil it anymore, but I will say, Yellow doesn't appear in the manga past the Emerald arc. Red appears less frequently with his last appearance in the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire arc, while Yellow doesn't make an appearance really past this.
So this is where their story ends. Unless of course she decides to come back to the Pokemon Adventures manga, or if they decide to end the manga, which if they did, I'm sure we'd be seeing adult versions of the two together, because unlike the anime, the characters in the manga actually age. Throughout all of this, it's clear that Yellow is the one in love, but I think Red is also in love. He's just a bit shy. I mean, in the games, all he says is ... so some level of that shyness has to be there in the manga, right? I feel like if he wasn't in love with her, he would have said something or at least clarified the thing about living together, but he didn't. He looks at her fondly, they have some cute moments together, and he held her in his arms, which on paper, not much, but for a Pokemon series? Oh yeah, that's a lot. So if you ask me, this is Red's one true shipping pair. I almost want to say it's canon, but technically it's not confirmed to be, so I can't say that. But I would go as far as saying that if I could. Of course, Red does have other people interested in him in the manga, but we'll go over that another time. But for now, I would say this is Red's one true love. A very wholesome and cute and incredibly simple ship, but it's a story that not many people know of since they only ever see the game version of Red. But just know, if Yellow ever appears in the games, you're gonna see a whole nother side to this man that you now know exists. Pokemon is not known for its romantic stories, but the few times that Pokemon does cater towards romance, it's always been a story of love and light. A story that leads two characters expressing their love to each other in some way, shape, or form. But in the 5th generation of Pokemon, everything got more mature. The games had aged the protagonist to symbolize how fans of the series were also older, and the story was the realest it's ever been to match that same audience. With that narrative in play, the manga also follows suit, as Pokemon Adventures delivered a love story that for the first time ever leads to a bittersweet ending. One that leads to one character's emotional downfall, and one that leads to the other perishing without getting to fulfill their own dream. Here's the love story of Black and White from Pokemon Adventures. But before we talk about their love story, we first need to talk about who they are. The Black and White arc starts off with the introduction of Black. Black is your typical happy-go-lucky, I'm gonna win protagonist. He's basically a shonen MC. And just like a shonen MC, he's pretty dumb and just fixated on one thing. And that's beating the Pokemon League and becoming the champion. Black's dream is so strong that he can't focus on or think about anything else. To counteract this, he has his Munna named Musha come and eat his dream, which allows his mind to go blank and see things clearly, effectively making his deduction skills the complete opposite of a shonen MC. He's got the deduction skills of the smartest character in the anime with the help of his Musha. Through that, his courage, his battling skills, his commitment and determination, and his handsome looks, he's got everything a girl would want in a boy. The only thing he was lacking was smarts, but again, he's covered for that too, making him a perfect protagonist off the rip. As the story goes, Bianca, Cheren, and Black are all supposed to receive starter Pokemon and Pokedexes from Professor Juniper. But in a weird turn of events, Black gets Tempic in a Pokedex, and with one big scream about his dream, he sets off on his own journey before meeting Juniper and saying bye to his childhood friends. And it's crazy because Cheren and Bianca helped Black so much with his dream too, as Black used Bianca's father's Pokemon to battle his friends for fun. He even kept going to library after library to study and research everything he needed to know about how to become a Pokemon champion from the very get-go. He even saw Cedric Juniper on TV one day talking about how he's going to give out the Pokedexes to the new generation and formulated an entire game plan to go on his journey from there, all at the age of like 4 or whatever. And as Cheren says, when Black sets his mind to something, nothing can stop him, including remembering to say bye to them. But anywho, as Black goes about his journey and makes his way to Striaton City, we see N watching over him, which, by the way, did I mention that there's a potential love triangle going on? I mean, I personally don't think so, but part of the fandom does. Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get there. We have the more interesting character of the two, White. You see, Black, in my opinion, was a very fun character in the manga, and I really liked his character for sure, but again, the man is perfect, at least for now. He doesn't come with any real flaws as such, and thus no real room for development. White, on the other hand, makes her weaknesses and flaws very apparent, and is a totally unique character. At the age of 14, White has her own agency company with hired Pokemon performers for TV series, commercials, movies, and other forms of media. She's a full-fledged entrepreneur, and the best part is she's not doing it for the money, but she's doing it for the love of the art. But in the middle of one of her gigs, Black is out here yelling about his dream and is disturbing the whole production. And while the film crew is trying to shoo him away, White hears that for tomorrow's shoot, she needs a male and female Tepig. But
she only has a female one. Luckily for her, Black's Tepig is a simp and sees White's Tepig Gigi in her Pokeball and sends it out himself so that he can play with her. Oh, how cute. Anyways, White takes advantage of this opportunity and hires Black in her agency because apparently this Galvantula damaging all the equipment was Black's fault according to the film crew, and they wouldn't let him go. But White said that BW agency will cover for all the damages because starting today, Black is with her. I'm telling you, it's a win-win for both of them. Because even though Black doesn't like it, it's not like he has the money to compensate for the damages anyway, so she's saving him more than he's saving her. In the distance, N sees White's hired Pokemon being used for filming and can't help but get emotional over the exploitation of Pokemon. But for White, she can't help but get emotional over how Tepig and Gigi put up such a beautiful performance. White is also incredibly kind towards her employees. For one, she has Tepig and Gigi sleeping inside a hotel while her and Black are camping outside, because they're the true artists. She puts her employees first at all times. And when she lectures Black about the damages about the equipment and how he's gonna have to work for 49 more times to pay for everything, she thanks him and his Tepig's help and is more grateful than anything. She even tells Black that he doesn't actually need to work 49 more times, but just a bit longer. Her dream is to run a show business, even if she never makes a profit, raising a first-class Pokemon performer and a first-class Pokemon entertainer. That's what matters to her, and that's her dream. Black doesn't say a word here, but his Musha resonates with White the same way that it resonates with Black, because Musha is a Pokemon that's drawn to those with very strong dreams. Seeing this, Black can't help but acknowledge it, and so he calls her boss from here on out. They head to bed, and I guess they only had one tent? So Black sleeps inside the tent and White sleeps outside, I guess, but in the middle of the night, they're attacked by something. White trembles in fear and is unable to retaliate, even when Black tells her to use her Pokemon. But since she doesn't attack back, Black does the work instead. It ends up being a Timber who's doing construction for Team Plasma. And the next morning, they're greeted by Ghetsis' famous speech from Accumula Town. Ghetsis propagates to everyone about how Pokemon would be better off being separated from humans, and that's Team Plasma's goal to liberate every single Pokemon. While this is happening, some people brush off Team Plasma's speech while others question it, while some others fully give into it and release their Pokemon on spot. And though Black and White try to stop people from doing so, they fail in convincing others that their Pokemon need them just as much as they need their Pokemon. Angered, Black tells White that he's gonna go stop Ghetsis in Team Plasma and runs off on his own. And while White does grab him and try to stop him, Black argues that releasing these Pokemon is also hurting them, and he's gonna stop Ghetsis from propagating any more lies. Black continues to run off and White gets a call for a new gig, but has to return the call in a little bit because she's fixated on going after Black. Once she catches up to Black realizes that Team Plasma must have been doing this for quite a while, because judging by its behavior, the Galvantula that he fought previously and the one that he also surprisingly caught was most likely one of these Pokemon. Gigi reminds White that she has to take the call to the agency and runs off, while Black debates what to do about Galvantula. Black admits to Galvantula that he was going to release it before he heard the speech, but he realizes if he releases Galvantula now, it's going to feel like it was abandoned twice in a row. Someone from the side comes out and tells Black that Galvantula is trying to talk to Black, but Black laughs it off, saying that it looks as if Galvantula is trying to tell him something, but talk? Like by using words? That's ridiculous. And to that, N comes up and tells Black that it's sad that he can't hear them. White, on the other hand, takes the work call and is bummed out because she quickly finds out they decide to go with a different agency. She tries to bounce back quickly by being grateful to Black because thanks to him, she has both Tepig and Gigi now. But then she kept going back and forth between the pros and cons of Black's actions and behavior, and she also reflects on Black and his character and realizes that she doesn't know all too much about him. And then she looks at Tepig and Gigi and realizes that they get along a lot better than they do. But despite that, she's gonna head back to Black, and this is where we see one of our first instances of this shipping come to play. Because in all of this, she said Black's name like a dozen times and is quite embarrassed when she realizes it. And she even goes a step further and admits that he's quite handsome. But when she goes back to see Black, she sees him get thrown back by another Pokemon trainer who he still doesn't know the identity of. In fact, he doesn't even know why he's fighting, and despite all of his efforts, he seems to be totally overpowered. White is shocked and questions if he can't win the battle, to which N reveals himself and says that White is right. He can't win the battle, and that the reason why he can't win is because Black keeps his Pokemon locked up in Pokeballs. Black goes on a full team assault, while N reveals all of his Pokemon that he currently has on hand. Black pulls out his Pokedex to inspect N's team, to which N grabs Black's hand and proclaims that this is the reason why he locks up Pokemon in their Pokeballs. At this point, we get a flashback scene to when N was inaugurated as the king of Team Plasma, the intro scene to the Black and White games, and we see how he's crowned to take on the mission of Pokemon liberation. explanation. We cut back to the battle between N and Black, where N introduces himself and keeps going on about how Pokedexes are imprisoning Pokemon for nothing, and how you can't hear the voices of Pokemon from there. But Black doesn't understand a word he's saying and interprets it as N wanting to have a battle, and he's down since he anyways wants to become the champion. Pause. Is this still a shipping video? We're going over one huge battle in extensive detail here. You see, we can't talk about Black and White's love story without talking about N. Again, there's a reason why the fandom thinks that there's a love triangle going on here, but more so than that, N is there to both give Black and White their own trauma and unique character arcs, so we need to talk about N and his character in the manga to see how Black and White deal with him and progress as individuals before we get to the romantic conclusion. And there's a whole lot more to talk about before then. Despite Black's determination and vigor to fight N, Black warns White that if worse comes to worse, she's gonna have to fight. Because though White is inexperienced and unwilling, if Black goes down, N just might keep attacking, in which case she's gotta defend them, which kudos for Black for realizing when he may potentially be unmatched. N's Portland comes out and sneakily attacks Gigi, and Black pushes White to fight, but in distress, White proclaims that she can't because she's never had a Pokemon battle before. Black cannot comprehend this, but N doesn't give them a moment to rest. As he continues with his full-on assault, he tells Black that he's listening to his Pokemon and that Black isn't, which is why he's gonna win, and proceeds to break out into tears when he claims that Pokemon will never be happy with people. And what does Black say to this? He tells N, blah blah blah, shut up. Full on Naruto mode with it. He fully showcases his team's willingness to be with him and how they themselves want to achieve the goal of being champion. Even Galvantula expresses interest in joining Black. He then explains that the Pokedex isn't a tool of evil or anything. People are naturally interested in Pokemon because they like them so much, so to have a device to learn more about them is really helpful. He takes it a step further and tells N that he's right. He can't hear these voices that he keeps talking about, and so, just like everyone outside of N, he relies on Pokeballs and a Pokedex to understand one another. And to prove this, he and Tepig attack N head-on, knocking some sense into him. As during the attack, N proclaims that he heard Tepig's voice and never knew that a Pokemon could feel this way. Through this, N calls back his Pokemon and walks away, claiming that he stumbled across another puzzle that he cannot solve. After N's leave, White mentions how N sounds a lot like Team Plasma, and he's probably one of them, but Black states that he doesn't know because N doesn't seem to be all that bad. And that's because during the fight, Mona was able to eat a part of N's dream, and through that dream, we get to see little N hugging and being with his Pokemon during a happier and simpler time. He claims that even though N sees things differently than them, he's still a good guy at heart, which has always been one of Black and White's key themes. Finally, to wrap up this battle, we see N alongside his injured Pokemon walk up towards N's castle. Cut forward a bit, and Sharon and Bianca are slighted after Black ran off without them, but they end up seeing Black with White chilling at a cafe, which is actually just the Striaton City gym. Bianca can't believe that Black would be going on a date with a girl like that, to which Sharon states that it doesn't look like a date to him. But is it though? Anywho, when White leaves, they confront Black about the whole thing and clears up the air by mentioning how he's employed to her and all, but still his friends are pretty upset that he ditched them early on, which led them to many issues during the triple battle against the Striaton City gym leaders, but through a few trials and tribulations, they managed to work together and sort out the relationship with one another, all the while each of them winning a Striaton City gym badge. White then comes back to steal Black from his friends, and Bianca realizes that White really does run a talent agency, clearing up her suspicions, but hey, if you ask me, she had perfect reason to be suspicious. This may not seem relevant to Black and White's romance just yet, but don't worry, you'll see why as Bianca and White will have their moment in the future. The next story arc isn't too relevant to the romance either, as it's the Dream Yard arc and Team Plasma stealing Black's Mona, but you do see White begin to adjust to Black's antics here, and as he screams out his dream, she's still thrown off by it, but she smiles through it. And when Black fails and loses consciousness, she's the one to help him and get him to safety. When Fennel's confused about Black's dream being eaten by Mona, White is the one to explain to her, so she's understanding him a lot better as time goes on. One key thing to note here is that this is the first time in the manga that we see what happens to Black when Musha is not there to eat his dream. He basically fuses out and doesn't know how to operate, and this will be very important much later in the video. Black and White make their way to Nacrian City because Black needs to go get a badge from Lenora. But first, White does White things, like making sure her and her whole crew are spiff and tidy, and if they're not, she'll give him a touch-up, like zipping up Black's jacket for him, and Black being visibly uncomfortable. And while White is trying to advertise her showbiz and is garnering attention due to Tepig and Gigi's now famous performance, Black is kinda messing things up by going about doing his own thing and tries to run off to fight Lenora, causing White to lose another job. But they're in Nacrene City after all, a place where all the upcoming artists come together, and she's so excited that nothing's gonna stop her. She tries to teach Black some marketing techniques, and Black actually gets excited to try it himself. But the director from the old shoot runs into them, and more or less the same thing from the Galvantula shoot happens, where something goes wrong and the video team thinks that Black did it. And he solves the case. But the important thing to note here is how supportive Black is of White's dream now. I know he just messed up a few things for her, but it's in seeing her work so hard and wanting to support her that he ends up getting his act together. White, by the end of it, even recognizes that trying to fit Black into something that she wants isn't the way to go, and appreciates his battling skills a lot more. It's really sweet how they begin to understand each other and make room for each other. But she still teases him and pushes him to help her out with marketing just a bit. And then once their video gig is done, she wishes him good luck on his gym battle. Black heads off, and the director from earlier asks White to join him on a meeting with the people in Nimbasa City as they're trying to come up with a new entertainment project for the city. White is super nervous and reluctant, and even while she's on the meeting with Elisa and the others, she's not sure of herself, but somehow in the midst of all of her emotions, she proposes the idea of a Pokemon musical. Yep. Hey, listen, I hated the musical too, but in this story, if it makes White happy, I guess it's fine. At least she wasn't the one who created it in the games. Black defeats Lenora, and White is standing there waiting for him, all smiley and happy. And she grabs his hands, and Black is blushing, saying that his victory isn't that big of a deal. But you know the boy is so happy to have her support. But yeah, she was definitely just super excited to tell him that she's creating a Pokemon musical in Nimbasa. Her excitement is so real that she's just swinging Black around like it's nothing, and Musha can't even help itself but wanting to go after to eat White's dream. The events of Pinwheel Forest take place, and both Berg and Clay are introduced into the story. Team Plasma also makes steps towards obtaining Zekrom, the Dragon of Ideals, so I think you know who's gonna be the one with the Dragon of Truth later on in the story. As they're exiting Pinwheel Forest, Virizion rushes through, and just by its run, it's able to create a strong gush of wind that totally tears through Black and White's clothes. Black wants to stay back to inspect the Pokemon, but White is in a rush to get new clothes. And when they make it to Sky Arrow Bridge, she realizes what a mess Black is in and tries cleaning him up. But Black and Tula end up having a lot of fun doing that. So much fun that the Castelia City janitor dude shows up and gets angry at Black for messing up the bridge. In typical Pokemon logic, this equates to now having a battle, and Black skillfully manages to defeat the janitor, where he reveals that it was indeed Virizion who messed up their clothes. He also proceeds to tell them how he's the president of the Battle Company, and White didn't miss the opportunity to network with him, and through this, she has all the facilities needed for the BW agency and her Pokemon in Castelia City. Side note, Black's Tepig goes on a whole big side quest with this boy who's actually a Zoroark. Poor Tep didn't understand what happened, but he reunites with Black, and White comes to pamper him and Gigi. And in Castelia City alone, she gets so many jobs and is super happy and successful, and as they're walking, White can't help but smile as she looks at Black. She even tells Black that he's basically paid off half of what he owes, so Tepig has been super hard at work, and White even gets him a Castelia Cone as I'll help Black and Tep in battle. Black can't believe that she stood in line that long just to get him a Castelia Cone, because if you remember from the games, those are high in demand. And to that, White tells him that she's glad he asked about this, because from now on, she wants to support him in his dream, and he's just taken aback. Ah, mutual support, you gotta love it. Even better, she doesn't really understand his dream of becoming champion in Pokemon battles and all, but she sees the work that he's putting in, and she respects that and is willing to support where she can. She knows Black is completely broke, and she knows that trainers need all kinds of items to keep battles going, and for that, White is willing to pay for all of Black's expenses. White does request that Black stay with her and continue to work for her, and that when he appears in the Pokemon League, he'll wear the BW Agency's company logo as a sponsor. Black happily agrees to this. As White grabs his hand, he starts blushing again. Okay, can we admit, the boy definitely at least has a crush on her. White goes up to Tep and is excited to tell him that she can keep working with him, when suddenly, Tepig starts to evolve. Black is excited to see Tepig evolve, but White is an absolute wreck, because even though she just told Black that she wants to support him in his dream, all that's on her mind right now is how well Tepig and Gigi look together. And so, beyond Pokemon logic, she presses the B button for Black and cancels Tepig's evolution. Somehow. And before they can question it, Black has to take Tepig and run off to his gym battle with Berg. While his battle is going on, Black isn't fully composed and isn't fighting at full strength, as he's deliberately holding Tepig back from fighting. Sure, he's got Brav the Braviary, but it managed to go down early in the fight, and while Tepig would be his next best bet, he's he's concerned about White and her dream. After a bit more work, White decides to go and support Black by watching his gym battle, and as she walks in, she sees Black talk to Tep about how he held back on purpose because he was concerned for White, but at the same time, he knows that he can't beat Berg unless he goes all out. Tep struggles against Dwebble, and White and Gigi can't bear to look, and as Tep looks as though it's fully defeated to a smackdown, we see Tep catch and break the rock by evolving into Pignite, giving him the victory. And then Black realizes that White was behind him for all of it. He's excited about his victory, but he's also super concerned for her and her feelings. But there isn't much time for that, as Iris comes in telling all of them that Bianca's Pokemon went missing. So they immediately switch gears, and Pignite gets a chance to really show off its new evolution during this time. Once they retrieve Bianca's Litwick and the other stolen Pokemon, Black and Pignite realize how much work they have for the BW agency and that they're gonna have to cancel all of it. And White comes in to give Black quite the scolding. JK, you really think I'd be hyping these two up if White was that inconsiderate? She would never say something like that. In fact, she took this time to turn a problem into a possibility and market Knight and Gigi in a different way, and they already have 3 shows lined up. She took the whole evolution thing like a champ, and beyond that, let's keep it a buck here. Even if the evolution didn't benefit her, she would have been happy for the evolution to just help Black with his own dream, and she never would have wanted to compromise that in any way. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Videos as long as these don't come easy and cost quite a bit to make, so just like White getting the support from Black, I could use your support to make my YouTube channel happen. Also, not trying to spoil it, but Black 2 and White 2 also have a manga, so if you want to stay tuned for that video, you should probably hit the notification bell while you're at it. So far, we've covered up to the first 3 volumes of the Black and White manga, and if you look at all the cover arts, it looks fairly simple and fun. But if you take a look at the 4th volume cover, you can tell that things are about to take a spin in a way that I don't think anyone would have predicted. As they make their way to Nimbasa City, they first have a little detour to Liberty Garden, where they encounter and befriend Victini, and then proceed to the desert resort to make it to Nimbasa City. However, upon arriving at the desert, the environment is too harsh for them to proceed, but White doesn't let this stop her, so she heads back to Castella City to buy both them equipment so they can proceed through the desert. Meanwhile, as Black is waiting, he stumbles across a strange man playing a gambling game with the construction workers. Black is intrigued, but I gotta say, kids, don't gamble, never gamble, because Black's intrigue gets him knocked out by the end of this. Seriously, it turns out that the gambler was actually Grimsley, and while he does nothing to hurt Black, they actually stumble upon an intruder Team Plasma Grunt who Grimsley swiftly defeats and ties up. And after doing so, he puts Black through a decision that he can't make. Black has so many questions as to why Grimsley, a member of the Elite Four, is here and all, and Grimsley says that he can answer if Black defeats him in a Pokemon battle. However, if Grimsley wins, he wants Black to give up something that means a lot to him, as the information that Grimsley is willing to provide is so valuable, it's only natural that Black provides something of equal value. Black is torn between sticking to his gym leader challenge or to fight a member of the Elite Four, something he's been dreaming about forever. And because he's so torn between the two and can't decide, he collapses in exhaustion to Grimsley's amusement. The next thing you know, when Black wakes up, White is there and explains that she carried Black, the Team Plasma Grunt, and his Maractus that was left all tied up, all by herself. Well, actually it was by using Black's bravery, but still, she managed to pull through, and Grimsley left a message telling that whoever found them exactly what to do. It's another encounter for both White and Black with Team Plasma, and them realizing that Team Plasma's goal isn't entirely noble. So they hand the grunt over to the police because White has way more important things to do, because it's time for her musical. White and Black arrive at the Pokemon musical, and White is on top of things during the rehearsal. She's giving it her all and putting in as much work as possible to make everything happen. Black and Musha are so impressed, but Black is wondering as to how and why White became the boss of everything when White was just the one who pitched the idea. That's when Elisa comes into the manga in the most fan-servicey way possible. Yep. That's Elisa in a way that I never thought I'd see her. They could have presented her in any other way, but oh well. Elisa essentially said that White kept bringing up more and more good ideas, so she was the one who became in charge of everything. Black is just shocked to find out that he's been talking to the Nimbasa City gym leader this whole time, but he's even more surprised to learn that Elisa knows who Black is, and it turns out that this is because Elisa and White have been having some girl talk. Who knows what White shared with Elisa, but we do know that she at least said that Black was really cute, to which Elisa agrees with. Okay, come on guys. These are the most obvious romantic signs in Pokemon that you will ever get. Not in the real world. Don't think like that. No. The musical starts and Elisa knocks it out of the park, and White is ever so grateful. Since the musical ended, Elisa invites Black to her gym challenge, but White runs into an issue where they need 200 prop cases that they can't deliver? It's either 200 or 200,000, but I'm gonna assume it's 200. Black wants to stay back and help, but Elisa tells Black to let her figure it out herself. Since the Driftful Bridge is closed, they have to think of other means to get the prop cases here, as that's something that White wanted to do for the audience of the show, to give them all a prop case just for attending. And even when the stupid director wants to cut costs here, White decides to spend her own money just to make sure the show goes well for everyone else. She ends up calling someone to send the packages via air, and for this, White had to stall the beginning of the show a bit, and then stall some more as fans were getting upset. But right in the nick of time, Skyla appears with prop cases and even gives them an aerial show. The fans love not only both the shows, but the prop cases as well, leaving White and the whole team emotional about the success of their project and how touched the audience was. White's team tells her to head to bed as she's been working non-stop, and she goes to leave for some shut-eye. But on the way there, she falls dizzy because of all the fatigue. And while she's about to collapse, someone grabs her hand and offers her to take a seat and rest. And while White is falling unconscious, Gigi is very evidently freaking out. And there's even more reason to freak out, because after this, we see White on the Nimbasa City Ferris wheel with N really close by. As if this wasn't creepy enough, this implies that somehow N was there stalking White, caught her as she fell, she rested on what looks to be the side of a street, fell unconscious, and N somehow picked her up and carried her all the way to the Ferris wheel and placed her there with him. Or maybe Servine did all the lifting, I don't know, but either ways, that's incredibly creepy, and I don't get how no one stopped them. Anywho, though N and Servine have White and Gigi trapped, and the stakes are looking high, we immediately cut to Black's gym battle with Elisa. Elisa's gym has a malfunction with the roller coasters, and so she tells Black to come back later. But despite that, Black wants to battle now, and to his dismay, he has to end up fighting Elisa as the roller coaster is moving. But he does his best to make use of the unique circumstance that he's in. He's losing the large majority of this match, but when Elisa asks why he doesn't use Musha to help him here, he states that he promised that he would never rely on Musha's help for a Pokemon battle, as there are some things that he has to figure out on his own, so that his Pokemon trust him, just like players of a sports team would trust their coach. Elisa admires the nobility, and as she should, because Black uses the out-of-control roller coaster to finish her off, leading to another Elisa butt shot. You thought I was going to say victory, didn't you? This scene is also where Black misses his badge and goes outside the gym on the roller coaster to see a Thundurus, another legendary encounter for Black, and one that Elisa also admires. And while there's a lot for Black to think about, he runs off to see White. When Elisa looks into what went wrong with her gym, we come to know that the Zorua from earlier was messing around with the controls in what looks to be an effort to stall Black so that he couldn't reach White on time, because this Zorua looks like it's awaiting N's return. But that Zorua is going to have to wait for some time, because right now we have the single most tense part of the whole story, a part of the story that won't be forgotten by anyone who has read it. As N and White are atop of the Ferris wheel in the middle of a thunderstorm, N proclaims that Thundurus has struck because the Pokemon are angry at people. White notices people down below watching them and is looking to see if she can get their help. But to her horror, it turns out to be Team Plasma. Not just any Team Plasma grunts though. One of them was the one that White turned into the police, but was saved by N. White gets a confirmation that N truly is a part of Team Plasma, but she finds out that not only is he part of Team Plasma, he is in fact Team Plasma's king, saving Pokemon and banning the ones who fight for Pokemon rights together. That's his job as king, appointed by Ghetsis of course. N gives his classic speech about Ferris wheels and asks White if she's following, but she freaks out and says that she doesn't understand anything he's saying, even when it comes to Pokemon liberation. N is surprised but says that he doesn't understand White either, but unlike her, he's actually been keeping a close eye on her because he wants to understand her and asks her to explain the musical. White gets terrified again as N approaches Gigi, and while White tries to protect her, Servine slaps her aside. N doesn't understand. Why would people exploit Pokemon to put a performance like a musical? Why would Pokemon want to imitate people? It's a paradox to him. So when he asks White to clarify why she's in showbiz, she offers to tell him, hoping that he'll get it with her explanation. When White was a little girl, she was watching a musical be performed, and this musical was one that only was performed by people. In the middle of the show, a little Cubchoo that no one expected climbed on stage and started to dance and sing alongside all the human performers. It was unplanned, but the audience and the Pokemon loved it so much. No one tried to stop the show either.
They just let the Pokemon express itself. That's when she realized that Pokemon have a desire to express themselves just like people. And in seeing the joy that this Cubchoo had as it danced on stage, White sought out to give other Pokemon a chance to experience creative fulfillment, and other people a chance to enjoy watching Pokemon perform. White tells N that though it feels like Pokemon are doing things against their will, that he's got it wrong. Some Pokemon love to express themselves and be on stage, and when she asks if she's wrong, to her surprise, N says that she's right. Just like how there are people who are good at sports, and some good at art, and others who are good at other things, the same applies to Pokemon, where there are different Pokemon who like to do different things, including performance. But he counters by saying that aspect is only a part of them. It's not everything, and that by placing too much weight over a talent like theatrical talents, people may be suppressing the instinct that every Pokemon has, the capacity to battle. As Pokemon fight, they grow and eventually evolve. To suppress that to determine whether a Pokemon is usable for other activities, in his mind, violates the essence of a Pokemon. And he pursues this by asking a now composed Gigi, who's comfortable around N, if she wishes to fight just as badly as she wishes to sing or dance. He even gets Gigi to think by asking her how she felt when Tep evolved into Pignite, and grew stronger by asking her if she also wants to experience the joy of victory in a battle. N out of nowhere has a Servine attack and launches Gigi into the air. White in desperation pleads to N that Gigi doesn't know how to fight, to which N replies by saying that it's not that she doesn't know how to, but it's simply because White won't let her fight. Even when White questions N about Team Plasma's philosophy, he retaliates by asking if she seriously believes that Pokemon have no desire to fight. If that's the case, then she isn't hearing the voices of her Pokemon. It's not a crime to create a musical or let them do different things, but not listening to the voices of one's own Pokemon, that's the true crime. Gigi gets up with a fire in her eyes and attacks Servine with the very same fire, which even throws White off guard. Gigi lands successfully and is absolutely proud of herself for performing in battle, while White comes to a horrific realization. N congratulates her, saying she's powerful. So powerful that she could probably even defeat the Pokemon League champion, a Pokemon with a bright future ahead for battling. Gigi turns excited to White, but White cannot process what's happening. She cannot fathom Gigi being fulfilled by Pokemon battles. She cannot fathom the fact that she hasn't heard Gigi's voice this entire time. She wishes to escape from this harsh reality that she's facing, and she tries to, but when you run away from reality, reality hits you right back. White tells Gigi that they're gonna jump from where they are on the Ferris wheel. She asks Gigi to come with her as White can catch her. White starts to fall backward as she's pleading for Gigi to come with her, but as she falls, Gigi decides to stay back with N. White falls, and N rises. Rises and claims that, as he's the one who hears all the Pokemon voices, he will be the one to defeat the Pokemon League champion, and later, the one to free every Pokemon from all their trainers. N commands Servine to go with White, and as White lies there, empty and broken, the two trainers can only think of one thing: Gigi defeating the Pokemon League champion. Night falls and Black is on a full search for White with his team when Marshall appears, lugging White across his shoulder. Black doesn't recognize Marshall at first and assumes that White has been captured and attacks him, but when Marshall of the Elite Four overwhelms him, Black recognizes him and apologizes. Marshall explains to Black that he found White laying unconscious by the Ferris wheel and that he should probably take her to the hospital, and while he would do it himself, he's in a bit of a hurry. Black apologizes but is confused as to why Marshall left the Servine with them, and Marshall's confused, saying that it was with White when he found her. Later, we see that the person that Marshall was in a hurry to meet was none other than the champion himself, Alder. White is unconscious at the hospital, mumbling the same words that she couldn't stop thinking about, when Black and Pignite realize that Gigi is gone. Black falls asleep on his chair when White comes to, but seeing Servine leads her to scream due to trauma. The nurses and doctors reveal that there's no real injury to her, but there is some level of shock. Black takes her outside and White tells him everything that happened. Black is furious, but White tries to explain that N didn't steal or liberate Gigi, but that Gigi chose to stay out of her own will. Black doesn't hear any of it and starts to suspect that Servine is there as N's spy, as was with White on the Ferris wheel. While Black is trying to get a hold of Servine to find N, he keeps fumbling but actually comes up with an idea without much less help for once. But that idea is simply to ask Marshall, so I don't know how great of an idea this really is. Meanwhile, Chris the Big comes to support the two and even asks White for an autograph, as she was the creative genius behind yesterday's Pokemon musical. Yeah, all of this happened in one day. Quite a memorable day, don't you think?
Black yells at Chris to give White some space because she's not feeling well, but Chris tells the two that she knows and hears all sorts of things, like where Marshall is and who he met up with. He went to the Battle Subway, another project that was happening in parallel to the Pokemon musical, and as we know, he met up with and is currently fighting Alder. The two have a battle, and while it looks like Marshall is winning, Alder ultimately takes the win. Apparently, Marshall has beaten Alder twice and lost him 1,076 times. Crazy. But it's not as crazy as how Gigi is about to disrespect Alder, I promise. Black introduces White to Marshall and tells White that Marshall is the one who saved her, and further inquires if Marshall saw anything or anyone else. When the stupid Nimbasa Mary comes running in and caring all about money and stuff, man, I hate this guy. No care or concern for her, and even after Black explains the situation, he was just concerned about deals regarding the Battle Subway with Alder. Maybe and was right to some extent, who knows. The group goes to find Alder just to see him playing with all kinds of wild Pokemon. Not just a few, but a whole flock of them. They all sense Alder's kindness and sense how Alder treats all Pokemon equally. And for Alder, he loves to play with all Pokemon, whether they're on his team or not. Just playing, nothing more, nothing less. White sees this and some life returns to her eyes. Marshall tells the group that since Alder's playing, they probably won't get his attention anytime soon. So he takes them to the Battle Subway and introduces them to the subway bosses, Ingo and Emmett. Marshall tells them that it's a good time to test out their battling skills, and while Black is eager to try it, he, with a super jumbled mind, declines for White's sake. White comes behind him and thanks him for being so considerate. Black tries to make excuses and hide his feelings for White, like by pitting it on Servine again, but White talks about how much fun Alder is having instead. She notices how Alder isn't expecting his Pokemon to be anything. Not strong, not beautiful, he's just simply connecting with them. Black questions her and why she's speaking about all this. White goes into a deep reflection and very adamantly states that she hasn't given up on her dream. But at the same time, she's not ignoring what N said. In fact, she's seriously considering it. Not just considering it, but actually admitting that N was right, and that she didn't hear Gigi's voice. She couldn't accept the truth, and so she ran away from it. Despite how traumatic of an experience this was for her, and mind you, this all happened just yesterday, White claims that it might be a good thing that Gigi got to experience Pokemon battles and be with N. Because now that Gigi has got to experience both showbiz and Pokemon battles, Gigi now has the freedom to choose between the two. And while White is confident that Gigi will pick showbiz and ultimately choose to be with White, for the time being, White decides it's time for her to take a ride on the Battle Subway. Well, if she could even throw a Pokeball, that is. She's seen trying to battle and capture dealing with Chris's help. White temporarily shuts down her agency and returns the Pokemon to their respective owners so that she can go on her training arc on the Battle Subway. All of the Pokemon for her shows were other people's Pokemon, minus Gigi. And without Gigi or any agency work lined up, she feels kind of empty. But Chris reminds her that she's looking for a new partner Pokemon, one that will help her during her fights on the Battle Subway. Marshall catches Black sulking at the fact that he doesn't get to go on the Battle Subway, and while he does want White to go, he wants to go too. Marshall tells him to be supportive of other people's dreams and tosses Black over to White to help her out. But that deerling that she was trying to catch got so angry at White that even Black couldn't do much to help when it attacked her. That's when we finally see Servine appear and defend White. That's when Black realizes that Servine is actually acting as White's Pokemon. Black tells White to give it a command, and just like Black suspected, Servine followed through. Black gets excited for White, and she tells Black that it's too early to celebrate because she doesn't know what to do past this point. And Black decides to teach her by showing her in parallel. Black finds himself a Tortuga, and the two simultaneously catch a new Pokemon to each of their parties, leading to a well-needed celebration. How sweet! We later find out that the Tortuga that Black caught originally belonged to Marshall, which I guess that makes sense as to why a fossil Pokemon is just chilling out in the wild. Because it was so hard-headed, Marshall had to let it go. But as fate would have it, it landed up with Black. Alder returns and he got so caught up in playing with Pokemon that he forgot about his other duties. And he's just catching strays from Black and White. But he claims that he isn't just playing with the Pokemon. No, he's on a journey of spirit. When Alder asks White why she's on the Battle Subway, she tells Alder how she's been separated from a Pokemon who's very dear to her, but that it will have a time to choose what it wants to do. And when that time comes, she doesn't want Gigi to only have one path to go on, but multiple paths to choose from. And since she wants her Pokemon to choose from multiple paths, it only makes sense that as a trainer, she explores multiple paths and picks the one that she wants between them as well. Which is why she's decided to ride the Battle Subway. Alder and Black are impressed. Alder is so impressed that he doesn't even know what to say. Ingo and Emmett appear and call upon White to enter the Battle Subway. And this is where it finally happens. 4 whole volumes in, and finally, White and Black have to go their own ways. White wishes Black off, and Black is blushing, scurrying for an excuse to have some sort of tie to White going forward. And he, of course, chalks him wanting to be with her to the fact that he still owes her some money, and the boy has never been so happy to be in debt in his entire life. As the train heads off, Black yells out to White, claiming that he's still her employee, that he's going to make his dream come true by entering the Pokemon League and wearing the BW agency's logo on his uniform, just like he promised. And with one last yell, he tells White to not give up on her dream and sends Brave off with her, as both Brave and Black wanted to make sure she was safe and sound. And plus, she needed a third Pokemon for the battle subway anyways. And with that parting gift, Black wishes her off, and the two go about their separate ways. Man, what a journey so far. And that's not the end of it. In fact, we're not even at the halfway point of the manga. This again was volume 4 out of 9 different volumes. The reason why this one took forever to explain is because this was White's character arc, and in my eyes, the volume that solidifies her as the best character in the story. Sure, while Black may be the true protagonist, as we will see him be one of the two legendary heroes alongside N real soon, White demonstrates the most amount of growth and maturity amongst the three of them. I say that because Black is hard-headed and doesn't consider any other paths but the one he set for himself. And while he's trying to understand others, still has some blinders on, and honestly in this story, he doesn't come off as gray as he does in the Black and White games. It's White who ironically comes off more gray because she gives herself the opportunity to really understand others, in this case both N and Black, and now even other Pokemon. There was so much growth in this one volume that we had to cover the entirety of it here in this video, but for better or for worse, this is not the case with the next two volumes, as Black and White are separated from each other and they go on their own little training arcs. Black mainly goes about his gym challenge, getting him the Driftwell City gym badge from Clay and the Mistralton City gym badge from Skyla, but only after she pushes him off the Celestial Tower and after she partakes in a bunch of fan service. White, on the other hand, is training on the Battle Subway, meets up with Chantel, who is also part of a little bit of fan service, and unknowingly witnesses the three legendary genies get captured. She also goes on a whole side quest with Bianca, where she demonstrates her growth as a trainer, befriends Meloetta, captures a few new Pokemon for her team, and gets Juniper's new Pokedex, making her the second Pokedex holder of the Unova region. During this time though, we definitely see the two characters think about each other here and there, showing how no matter where they go, they're still the ones who occupy their thoughts. It's pretty cute. Other major things you should know from this is that Gym Leaders 2 to 6 teamed up with Black to protect the Darkstone, but Team Plasma and the Shadow Tree had basically bopped them using the genies that they caught. Yeah, they actually caught legendaries before the legendary dragon. Who would have thought? And also ended up being the Darkstone and befriending Zekrom, so that's there. And then Bryson had to take Black on a training arc, so he's ready to take on N, where he ended up receiving not only the Icarus City gym badge, but also the Lightstone to unlock and befriend Reshiram. But of course, not yet. Actually, before trying to unlock the Lightstone, Black encounters the Swords of Justice, and while he does get their approval, they don't end up helping him in his effort. And you know, that help would have been really nice because, you won't believe it, only 7 gym badges in, and Alder and Marshall just on a stroll. And who do they run into? None other than N, who's pulled up to challenge Alder with a team that consists of Archeops, Darmanitan, okay, good picks, Zekrom, which is overkill, but he kinda has to make up for it because he has a freaking Timple and that Zoroark from earlier. Oh, but don't you worry, his 6th pick is a secret, and this 6th pick is absolute bogus, because I'll tell you, this battle between Alder and N is a 4-on-4, and guess which two Pokemon N doesn't end up using? Timple and Zekrom. So depending on who this last Pokemon is, it's going to heavily determine what kind of champion Alder really is in the manga. Black is currently traveling with Iris, and he happens to be around where the battle is happening, but he's so bummed out that he couldn't get the help of the Swords of Justice. Iris tries to cheer him up in her own way, but he claims that she can never understand how he feels, to which Iris uses it as an opportunity to tease him about a potential crush with either White or Bianca. Black denies this, saying that only his Pokemon understand him. Once Iris finds out that Braviary is with White, she doubles down on his crush on her, to which Black can't stand how annoying she is and wishes that Brave was actually here. And to his amazement, Brave was really there. He came back, and if he came back, you already know who else came back. White, with a fully evolved Superior as well as a whole team of Pokemon. And since she has Volibee now, she was able to return Brave to him. She even surprises him with her new Pokedex. Iris teases them further, and while I'm sure the two really want to catch up, they hear the sounds of a nearby battle, where, gee, wouldn't you guess it, the manga completely disrespects Alder, because with their heroes there to witness it, Alder falls to N. Not to his Zekrom, but to a combination of Zorua and frickin' Gigi. Gigi, this innocent temping that we knew from like the beginning of the manga, straight up destroys the old man and his team. Now, to be fair, he did have 3 Pokemon that were weak to fire types, but still, Gigi? I know there was that premonition with the bright future to defeat the champion and all, but come on. Even Black's Emboar doesn't have that capability. That means innately, Gigi has been like the strongest Pokemon in the whole manga. N keeps gassing up Gigi, and with White there, N decides to stir the pot by asking White if she wants him to turn Gigi to be a part of shows, to which she gives him a
firm no, and sees how White has grown in raising Servine and other Pokemon, and that she as a trainer has learned to listen to the voices of Pokemon, and White actually thanks her for this experience. And once she does, she speaks to Gigi directly and tells her that she's free to do what she wishes to do, and that if she ever wants to perform in shows, she can always come back to White. And if that day ever comes, she won't let N stand in the way. She will fight him. Best character growth by a long shot, bro. Easy. And is also impressed, but not in a way that I deem appropriate. He straight up grabs her because he thinks that they share the same ideal. To which, of course, Black is not having any of it. He pulls her aside and the two are taken aback as Cedric Juniper, Professor Juniper's father, comes in with his samurai swinging, telling them that they shouldn't let him get away. The three of them bring out their fully evolved starters and fight off N's weakened Pokemon. Literally, Bo, Black's Emboar, and White don't hold back when fighting Gigi either. N decides to calmly retreat when Black tries to tell him that he's gonna go with N as well to save all the gym leaders, to which N doesn't even have to do anything to win but play his favorite game, the psychological game. He questions Black if he thinks he can defeat him the way he is, to which N states that even his Pokemon know that if they were to follow Black's commands, they would lose in the state that they're in. Black realizes the truth and asks Musha to eat his head, which for the first time ever, she refuses to. N goes up to Black and says that his dream doesn't taste good anymore, and that Munna has no reason to stay because it was only there because he kept on feeding it, a relationship of convenience. But now that Black's dream has dwindled, Munna is gone. Black and Munna never had a real friendship. White tries to calm Black down, but Black can't take it and collapses right then and there. And while N is happy he's defeated Elder, he knows that Black will stand again alongside Reshiram. Volume 8 begins with a bunch of people entering the Pokemon League, because this time around, all of the trainers who obtained 8 gym badges battle in a tournament, with the victor being the one who's able to take on the Pokemon League. The Elite 4 members gather, and they're split between whether they should interfere with Team Plasma or not. But ultimately, Caitlyn decides to step up and use the Gothitelle to find out where the Univern gym leaders are being held hostage. Drayden announces that the 31 trainers as contestants for this year's Pokemon League, and Black isn't one of them. Not only because he's knocked out, but also because he only has 7 gym badges. White reflects on how something like this happened before in Route 4, but how different this is. And we see Black in a dream state trying to chase after and plead with Munna. As he slowly begins to wake up, Cedric, Juniper, and White realize that Gigi was a Tepic that Cedric owned his lab way back that N freed a year ago. That along with Snivy, who's now White's superior, were N's first Pokemon that he liberated. Juniper wonders if N Zoroa was the same one who spied on her lab, and Black wakes up to confirm the suspicions because he also dealt with the same Zoroa. He gets up and starts to get dressed, and White asks him where he's going, and Black says he's going to Devema Town. White again tries to talk some sense into him, as she's gone through the same psychological warfare that he's currently being subjected to. White encourages him to believe in his dream, to which Black says that he just saw a dream of chasing after Musha, a nightmare. Before that, another dream of the Lightstone getting stolen. Till now, all he's ever dreamed of was the Pokemon League. He was a simple kid, but now, pure dreams like that don't exist for him anymore. He's given up on them. Any which way, it's not like he can compete with 7 badges. The TV gets his attention, and he sees the contestants go through the badge check gates, and his team just looks at him with sadness. Black realizes that he didn't just promise Musha that he'll win the league, but rather, he promised his whole team. He stares down his Pokemon, and decides to take on the Pokemon League. Black flies in the Pokemon League gates, where he meets Drayden, and argues that, since the actual tournament begins tomorrow, he still has time to enter during the opening ceremony. And to that, before Drayden can give him a proper answer, Black wastes no time in challenging Drake to a battle. The two duke it out, and Drayden is winning by a clear mile. Black is using Brave, but he has doubts that Brave will leave, similar to the way that Musha did. Drayden takes Brave down in this one-on-one fight, and Black is about to concede, saying that he's satisfied because he and his team have given it their all. When suddenly, Black hears Clay's voice. The gate behind Drayden opens with a snowy onslaught, but from the onslaught, Caitlyn's Gothitelle appears in order to speak to Black. The gym leaders speak to Black through Gothitelle's telepathy, and while they're unaware of their present location, they encourage Black to recall all the times he won against them. He won only because he heard his Pokemon's voices. He won because of the bond and trust between his Pokemon. It's not any kind of deception. It's the truth. It's Black's truth. And with that, Black regains everything he's lost and immediately retaliates against Drayden using the cold air from earlier to weaken Trotagon and take it out in battle. And with that victory, Drayden presents Black as the final contestant of the Pokemon League, to which White and the others are all shocked and immediately chase after him as he and his Pokemon are celebrating the next step closer to their dream. The next day, the tournament takes place, and we immediately jump into the top 8, which consists of Black, Iris, this guy named Gray, who obviously is a Team Plasma person, this guy who's obviously Looker, Sharon, Marlin, this youngster who remember him for a future video, and this mysterious other guy? Yeah, there's at least one other character here who's actually mysterious. It's Black versus Looker, and Black wins, leading Looker to go on his investigation against Team Plasma, primarily against Gray. Sharon beats his kid Leo, but Sharon demonstrates a rather cold personality. He's not like himself at all, to the point where even Black is concerned. It's Marlin versus the Hood
Hoodman, and surprisingly, the Hoodman wins. And he's glad because just by observing the league, he got to benefit through research and insight. And finally, it's Iris versus Gray, where Iris makes a mockery of him and wins despite having the type of disadvantage. Bryson becomes suspicious of the Hoodman and his BM because the hostage gym leaders have no memory of where they are. So Bryson thinks that the Hoodman must have come in and beat him to wipe their memories. So he goes on a spy mission. But not alone, because guess who's trying something else that's new? White. Goated, bro, I'm telling you. Now, if you're wondering where the Starlight City gym leaders are, they're busy stopping the Shadow Triad from capturing the Swords of Justice, so they actually have a better role here than they do in the games. And there's a small tease for Genesect, which again, we'll touch upon in a future video. Black takes on Iris in a heated battle, and in the semifinals where the two are sharing their emotions on why it should be them to defeat N. Both are saying this for the sake of others. And while Black does win, he promises Iris to take on her dream as well. White goes to do some espionage work on Marlin to see what he learned about the Hoodman. But though White is trying new things, it doesn't mean that she's good at it, because Marlin sees right through it. Looker is spying on the spy and is shocked to learn that he's not the only one suspicious of this guy. Marlin says that while there's nothing odd about him, the only thing that threw him off is that Marlin can tell that he didn't own all 8 gym badges, which, I mean, that's a huge red flag, but he tells White that he battled fair and square, so it should be fine because his skills are the real deal. But the person who Marlin really finds suspicious is Charon. As Charon fights the Hoodman, we see that Marlin told White that something is gripping Charon's heart. White goes to talk to Leo, the kid who Charon beat last round, who's cheering for Charon to win. And while the kid is shy around girls, his support for Charon is still strong. But in the middle of the fight, we see Charon treats Snivy poorly, and also see that he's held it back from evolving. Charon opts to win the fight with Unpheasant and walks away. And when Leo goes to show Charon his support, Charon just brushes it aside and walks away. Enraged, Black yells at Charon asking him what's gotten into him, treating someone who supported him like that and treating his own Pokemon the way he did. Charon tells Black that he doesn't care about weak things anymore, and that he's figured out what he's wanted this whole time. All his life, he's pushed aside his own needs to take care of others. And finally, he knows what he wants for himself. Power. His Boulder evolves and Diglett and Emboar clash in a battle of emotions as Black attempts to save Charon from whatever it is that he's going through, while Marshall and Grimsley come to know of the tremors of N's castle beneath them. White finds Gray and the Hoodman scheming things together, but unfortunately, she's caught by them. While Charon is fighting Black while repeating the words of Team Plasma, Gray reveals himself to be Zinzalin, and Zinzalin is impressed as Charon has become a member of Team Plasma in both heart and soul. Looker comes in to save White, and White yells at Black telling him what's happened to Charon. But at that moment, the Hoodman teleports White away with him, essentially kidnapping White. Black and Drayden try to stop the battle to prioritize White and the audience's safety, but Charon refused to abide by that and takes the battle to the rooftop. And while I would love to cover this battle in full here, I do plan to make another video talking about just Black and Charon one day, so I'll save most of her for then. For the sake of the story, Charon started to become power hungry once he saw N and Zekrom, and even tells Black that Muna left him because he was weak. But as they clash, the two of them are put into a dream sequence where the two go back to their childhood, and Charon returns to his former self. And it's all because Musha returned to Black as a Basharna. We later find out that all that's happened is that Muna wanted to support Black even further, so it went off to find a means to evolve, and eventually it ran into Caitlyn, who helped it evolve using a moonstone. And once it evolved, it returned right back to support Black. Now reunited with Musha, Black is filled with rage as Team Plasma used Charon and took White hostage. In this flurry of emotion, Reshiram awakens, and the two head off to fight N. Right before Black heads off to fight N, one of the craziest panels in the series, where he's coming down with Reshiram looking like an angel from heaven, we see the Swords of Justice send the Starlight City gym leaders and the Shadow Triad away flying, with the intention of hurting the Shadow Triad alone. While the Shadow Triad loses, they manage to use Genesect to petrify the 3 legendary Pokemon and let them sink into the abyss, while Keldeo manages to escape. Meanwhile, there's a full-on war happening at N's castle, and when I mean war, I mean it. Every Team Plasma member appears to fight, and we see the gym leaders tied to a stake. The lead 4 alongside Black, Iris, and Drayden challenge Team Plasma, but it's not enough. Ghetsis tells Black that even with Reshiram, Black can't make his way to the king, as he and the 7 sages are there to stop him. But from behind Black, we see the craziest ensemble crew join the fight. Everyone is here. Every single side character that we've seen in the story comes by to help Black make his way to N. And when I say everyone, I mean literally everyone, even the random hiker dude from the first volume. Together with their efforts, they actually managed to free the Unimate gym leaders, leading to a truly climactic battle between everyone in this story. Black makes his way to N, and while Cedric, Looker, and Leo try to help him, Black knows that only Reshiram can stop Zekrom. And so N and Black clash in one final duel. Black and N go at it, but Black has the disadvantage. Cedric uses this time to support Black in other ways by upgrading his Pokedex with info on the legendary dragons, leading Black to learn more about them and giving him the edge in the fight. But not only that, As he's fighting, Black realizes that the only way for him to win is to face N with the same depth of feeling that Reshiram has for Zekrom, harmonizing with the dragon and in turn hearing its voice. N lights up and recognizes Black's growth. He recognizes that Reshiram has truly chosen him to be the hero of truth. Zekrom and Reshiram grow through a powerful exchange of Fusion Bolt and Fusion Flare, as these moves do more damage after another. The two Pokemon are at a standoff, but thanks to what Black learned through the Pokedex, Black is able to time his attack perfectly, leading to Zekrom's incineration and defeat. Black and Reshiram have won. Despite this, N and Zekrom flee to N's castle, where White is also seen to be in the care of N's sisters. Amanda, her superior, is still seen to be protecting White, but N's sisters obviously have no intent on harming White. All they know is that the Hoodmen brought her there, and they don't know why either, because the guy does whatever he wants to do. But White isn't even concerned about that anymore because White sees Gigi. Anthea and Concordia explain that N released all of his Pokemon that he lived with before his final battle, but Zorua and Gigi decide to come back. The sisters then go on to explain that they took care of N and that N all of his life grew up around Pokemon who were mistreated by humans in this very room. That Ghetsis adopted him so that he could manipulate N by only letting him hear voices of abused Pokemon year after year. But after seeing Black and White and hearing the voices of their own Pokemon, N was able to understand and even told the Pokemon that he released that if there's a person out there that they really like, there's nothing wrong in staying with them. N and Black continued to clash in the depths of the castle, and the sisters explained that though Ghetsis was successful with his brainwashing, after stepping outside and hearing Black's Tepig's voice, that was the first time that N discovered the truth. And just like White, he first tried to reject the truth, but eventually he had learned to accept it. Gigi, on the other hand, is having tons of fun in N's room, and just like White said, Gigi eventually returned to her as a Pokemon performer, but under N's ownership, as White agrees that she is now N's Pokemon, and the two partner up once again to go and find Black and N. The second round of their battle continues and both sides are struggling, when suddenly N and Black are both shocked when two Zekroms appear. Even Zekrom is confused, but in this time, Black commands Reshiram to attack, finishing them off once and for all. And that's when we see that Zorua returned to N to help it in battle. N is confused as to why Zorua returned to him, but Black explains that it's obvious, and N understands as well. Zorua and Gigi both want to be with him. N playfully teases Zorua for interfering in the battle, and is just happy to be reunited with him. N and Black take some time to relax and just be with their Pokemon, when all of a sudden, Ghetsis arrives, belittling N, revealing to Black for the first time that N is his adopted son. Ghetsis reveals that his whole plan was to use N from the get-go, leaving him in the dark of his true plan to rule the world through Pokemon liberation, because after all, who else could use Pokemon if the world was liberated from them? Ghetsis needed N to reawaken Zekrom and lead the people, but in trying to be a hero, N was defeated. But unlike the games here, Ghetsis doesn't let this defeat stop him. In fact, he realizes that since there's no one else to witness this, all he needs to do is get rid of Black to remove this inconvenient truth, and asks Hydreigon to burn him to a crisp. Reshiram is too weakened to help Black, but Black has a whole team of other Pokemon, but so does Ghetsis. So, paralleling Black's first battle with N, both of their teams go for an all-out fight. Ghetsis has the type advantage with every matchup, and that's because Ghetsis has been keeping an eye on him this whole time. Black is being surrounded by the flames, but Ghetsis is going on about all the different ways he used N and all the ploys that he's been scheming. Black is hoping that N didn't hear any of it, because he himself cannot bear to hear the way that N has been used, and is the most enraged he's been in the entire story. Even though Black is losing, he knows what he has to do to survive. One last time, he calls upon Musha, and his mind goes blank, leading him to figure out the strategy, giving him a way to safely maneuver his Pokemon so that he has the advantage on them. Ghetsis tries to escape, but Costa imprisons him with Stone Edge, and Black successfully subdues Ghetsis, at least for now. Meanwhile, the entire Elite Four has been fighting off the Hoodmen and the Legendary Genies, but he manages to make his escape in the end, with the Elite Four almost learning nothing about him, though he does claim that he will meet them again. And while Black is contemplating what to do with Ghetsis, White returns to Black holding his hands, with a silhouette pattern that can only be described as a pattern of love. Black and White decide to head down to save the members of Team Plasma when N wakes up and asks them to wait a moment. Black is protective of White, but White eases him up, and the three of them speak, and asks White if she was able to figure out what Gigi wants, and White tells him that she was, and that she was only able to ever hear Gigi's voice because of N's help. N is in a state that I can't even describe. He never thought that the three of them would ever be able to have such a relaxed conversation like this, and he claims that this might be what he was longing for all this time. Black tells N that he's also happy they can speak like this now, and how he saw his gentle dream when they first fought, and that it's because he saw that dream that Black knew that even though he felt like he could never forgive N, he knew N was someone who always wanted what was best for the Pokemon. That was a truth that he absolutely was sure of. N tells Black that he began to have doubts in what he fought for in the very same fight in the Accumula town, and as he traveled around Unova, that doubt grew more and more. He fought alongside Zekrom to see how strong his ideals were, but in the end, he realized that though he could hear the voices of Pokemon, he could never understand them the way that Black did. N gets up and apologizes to Black as he needs to figure out what he needs to do. And with one farewell to them, he sets off with Zekrom, even leaving Zoro behind, and with all of Unova there to witness his departure, N flies off into the sunset. Ghetsis watches from the cracks of the rocks, and Reshiram cries out loudly. White and Black think that it's because Reshiram feels like it's lost half its soul, when suddenly, Gigi, White, and Black are all being drawn to Reshiram. Black quickly realizes what this is. It's the opposite of when Reshiram was awakened from the Lightstone. This time around, it's the reverse, and everything around it is being sucked into the Lightstone, since Reshiram has finished its battle with Zekrom. Black keeps White protected, but Ghetsis tells Black that she will be sucked in and turned into stone as well. Black is concerned, but hesitantly asks Ghetsis that if he's just frustrated because he can't do anything from being in the middle of the rocks, when Ghetsis reveals that it's actually the contrary, because Black has provided a perfect means for Ghetsis to get rid of him. Black gets lifted into the air and is now stuck with Reshiram. Ghetsis is shown to have been released from the rocks, thanks to the Hoodmans being him from earlier, and he's shown to be very pleased with the events that have occurred. Ghetsis departs and tells Black that this will be the last time that they ever meet. White is frantic and desperately wants to help Black out of there, but Black tells her to stay away from him. As White rushes off to get help, Black calls her boss one last time. She turns around and he tells her that he hasn't broken his promise to her. White is confused, but Black reminds her that he promised that if he ever made it to the Pokemon League, he would wear the BW Agency logo to show to the world. White reflects upon their journey, and Black tells her his plan as to how he's going to show it off and present her agency to the world. But with a worried smile, he states that he messed up. As Reshiram collapses in on itself, Black asks White if he worked hard enough to pay for the equipment that he damaged. With his last breath, his concern or care wasn't for him, but it was for her and for their time together. And before he can call her boss one more time, Reshiram and Black turn into the Lightstone. White trembles and goes to pick up the Lightstone, telling Black that he doesn't need to worry about paying her anymore. But as she goes to pick it up, the stone begins to lift up into the air and flies off into the void, leaving White in anguish and absolute despair. Black and White were together from the beginning of this journey, and while they did have their time away from each other, they were never truly separated from each other, as they lived in each other's hearts. But now, Black is gone. In Pokemon Adventures, it's never been the case that two characters have been around each other for this long and developed romantic feelings for each other. It's never been this obvious either. This is the first time where we see a relationship go from absolute strangers to lovers in the series. And while the two cared and supported for each other, while the two truly fell in love with each other and could have begun a new life together, fate had other plans in store for them, as White is left broken and Black is no more. But what happens next? How does White handle the loss, and will they ever find the Lightstone again? Will they ever be able to save Black from it? In the real world, these questions never got answered until around 7 years later, but in terms of the story, we find out after a 2-year time skip. Ghetsis meets up with the Hoodman, who reveals himself to be Team Plasma scientist Colress, and the Team Plasma members retire from their efforts, with a particular girl expressing her concerns in wanting to stay with N's Pokemon, but N's sisters encourage her to go and give her N's pendant until he returns. This story isn't over just yet. Next time, we cover an all-new love story with an all-new love triangle with the story of Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. And through this new story, we will also get to see the final conclusion to the love story between Black and White. Stay tuned. A love triangle in Pokemon? There's no way, right? Well, seeing as how Pokemon Adventures is a bit more of a mature take on the Pokemon series in comparison to the games, and definitely the anime, it's possible. But for the most part until now, the couples we've covered in the manga have been relatively simple. But this time around in Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, it gets super complicated. Because not only is there a love triangle happening between our two main protagonists, Blake and Whitley alongside N, but literally out of nowhere, this story starts off with Blake breaking up with Yancy, the idol from Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, and the one character that you can actually go on a date with in the entirety of the main series Pokemon games. So this adventure story starts off very different from every other one, and sets an entirely different tone. But what if I told you that this tone is a facade? Because while this adventure arc starts off as a love story, it unfolds into something entirely different, as the love is only there to conceal the truth. Just like how Blake and Whitley are walking facades themselves, concealing their own true selves and doing whatever they can to ensure that the people around them don't learn about their true selves, that they're doing whatever they can do to stay one step ahead of each other. Because for the first time ever, we don't just have a love story in Pokemon. No, instead, we have an espionage love story, a story about a spy and a criminal and the roller coaster of emotions that they go through, or the lack thereof. Just like the games, the Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 manga takes place 2 years after the events of the Pokemon Black and White manga. But though it was a 2-year time skip within the story, in the real world, this was a 7-year journey, which I'll touch upon later. But the cover art for the first volume of the series is already built for the shipping bait. Like I mentioned earlier, the story starts off with Blake breaking up with Yancy, but it turns out that Blake had done this intentionally for her own good, or so he says. Because as him and his friend Leo head back to school, Blake has 3 girls just waiting there for him, and he successfully flirts with all 3 of them in front of each other's face. Leo's a bit jealous and tells Blake that he doesn't know how to speak to girls, and he just freezes at the sight of them, which is a reference to how he froze up in Black and White when White first approached him in the Pokemon League. Blake tells him to have some more confidence in himself, as he was a top 8 contestant in the Pokemon League after all. But no one remembered Leo's wins because the events of the league were so crazy, and all that people really cared about were details related to Team Plasma and what ended up happening with Black, because he ended up disappearing by the end of that battle. Blake seems intrigued, but he quickly reminds Leo that they have to go to class to meet their new afternoon teacher, and the two try to sneak into class when Hugh blows their cover. Blake tries to negotiate by introducing him to girls when Hugh just goes on a rage about wanting to be stronger and stuff, so clearly by now it's clear that Blake is not just into one girl, he's into all of them. And as Hugh is mad at Blake, Sharon appears as the teacher of this class. And for those of you that read the Black and White manga, you'd remember that Sharon was Leo's last opponent in the Pokemon League, and this is when Sharon had still gone evil, so Leo seeing him here was quite a shock. But Sharon finally acknowledges Leo and gives him the respect and appreciation that he needs. And he follows that up by sending him along with the other 2 hooligans out as punishment. And even here, the girls are trying to say that Hugh was the one who caused problems, and Blake is grateful. When they're let back in, Blake gets distracted as he smells someone coming, a woman, and to his excitement, it turns out to be Whitley and her mom, to which Blake thinks that they're both pretty. Whitley, or Whiteley, introduces herself and mentions a bunch of things about herself, including her star sign, and Blake is just out here taking notes on her. Leo is bummed because his and her star signs don't align, and he was just curious about her strength and her Pokemon. Sharon comments on the weird day, and since the day is so weird, he claims that they're gonna have a practical battle class, which ends up being 2 tournaments amongst the students, a boys tournament and a girls tournament. Somehow, Blake and Hugh both end up being stronger than Leo, despite him being a top 8 contestant in the Pokemon League, and Blake managed to win the whole tournament. Meanwhile, Whiteley accidentally managed to win the girls tournament when she didn't mean to go this hard from the get-go. Sharon calls for everyone's attention, and his childhood friend Bianca appears, now as Professor Juniper's research assistant. And for some incredible reason that will never make sense to me, the winners of this particular class's first tournament got to be the new Pokedex holders of the Unova region, as Bianca gives both Blake and Whiteley with Pokedexes to help Professor Juniper's research. Whiteley, in shock and horror, says that she can't take it, when Romeo over here grabs her hand and tries to flatter her into taking it, and due to the pressure, she accepts it. That night, we see Whiteley alone in her room with Fungi, lamenting to herself about why her mom made her end up joining the school. And while it may be confusing as to why she's so distraught, as she opens her pendant and looks to N for guidance, we quickly learn that it's because she was once indeed from Team Plasma. Not just anyone from Team Plasma, but rather the same girl at the end of the Black and White series. And just like how she loved N then, she still loves him now, and is eagerly awaiting his return. Meanwhile, Looker already arrives in the Unova region to close the case on the remaining sages of Team Plasma. It turns out that the International Police has already paired him up with someone else who's already present in Unova. And this, of course, is none other than Blake. And this is where we see a totally different side of him. Or rather, we see him drop his facade and see him for who he really is. We see Blake make reports on the various girls around his age that he's been flirting with and hitting on, and check them off a list of suspects who may be related to Team Plasma, and he deems them unrelated to the villainous organization. That's when Looker pops in, and you see Blake totally
face and even looking down and being condescending with him. Looker gets captured by a Scolipede that's been following him, and Blake and Doo-Wop make quick work of the Pokemon. Looker's impressed and is glad to have him work under him when Blake enlightens him by mentioning that he's actually Looker's superior, and we see his true characteristics come to light. Now before we address Looker's shock, yes, though this part of the Black to White story is masked as a comedic love story, the truth is it's a story unveiling the mask and recognizing the cop versus criminal story. Blake and Whiteley are lovers on the surface, but that's just the mask. And once the mask falls off, can their relationship last? That's not the only mask that's at play here either. Almost every single one of the new main characters are wearing some kind of mask, and as they get unveiled, the tone of the story shifts, and the characters around them get affected in many ways. It's kind of crazy how they made this work, but I want you to pay attention to this theme of masks throughout, and enjoy the fun and comedy while it lasts. Looker is shocked, and absolutely cannot believe that this kid is a superior, but we very quickly see how Blake is the superior, and just by assessing the battle, Blake is able to deduct that this Scolipede isn't a wild Scolipede, but rather a trained one that was sent to go after Looker specifically. Blake thinks that the situation is more dire than he expected, so he and Looker head out, and we see Blake use a bunch of cool international spy gadgets, the way they do in like Spy Kids or Inspector Gadget. He takes Looker to one of their hideouts where Looker meets Blake's supplier, Magician. Well, I say supplier, but this guy pretty much does everything possible for Blake, so he's kind of like the brains of the whole thing. So while Blake is requesting new gadgets from him, Blake takes Looker and Croaking for training, and that's when Looker starts to refer to him as a superior. But in the middle of the training, they hear an explosion, and already Blake has to go up, chase down, and fight a Genesect. Yeah, crazy Pokemon to have in the first volume of the series. This fight sequence is really cool, as we see both Blake and Looker use a bunch of tools and really play into the spy motif. We also see Doo-Wop hold its own against Genesect and get a backstory on it and how Blake chose it as his partner, even when he wasn't willing to get a partner at the time. Probably because Doo-Wop was so skilled and disciplined even then. We learn that it's Colress who's the one commanding Genesect, and he even goes as far as using a point-blank technical blast on Blake. Blake survives due to his armor and Doo-Wop's help, but his main concern as an inspector is the civilian safety. This battle goes on for a while, but Blake quickly learns that though Colress is commanding Genesect, he hasn't been able to catch it yet. He's using a device called the Colress machine to command it, but since it's a wild Pokemon, he can still catch it. Blake stomps on Colress's ego to catch him off guard, and after one dramatic exchange, he manages to catch Genesect, but like all legendary captures, he spent like minimum 30 Pokeballs on it, which I respect the realism. Looker tries to arrest Colress since he failed to 2 years ago, but Colress escapes, not caring about Genesect, but caring about the Colress machine instead. And he also mentions that since N left, Ghetsis appointed him as the new leader of Team Plasma, and just heads off. As the battle is coming to a close, the bystanders come to make sure everything's okay, and Blake immediately puts aside his international police persona for the persona of a child, and once again, he starts flirting with the girls. Looker gets upset, but Blake calmly tells him that this is also part of the mission. The Colress machine had already begun development 2 years ago during the time of the Pokemon League, and while this was going on, there was already another group within Team Plasma who ran their own research to nullify the Colress machine, which was saved to a memory card that was lost as Team Plasma split. The only information that they do have is that this memory card is with the hands of a 12-year-old girl associated to Team Plasma. And who can this be other than Whiteley, of course? Yeah, I said it early in the video, I know. The next day, it's still any other school day for Blake, as no one in the class was suspicious of anything. And seeing as how he needs more Pokemon on his team and how he needs to collect more data for his Pokedex to acquire more intel for himself, he decides that it's a perfect time to approach Whiteley and takes her by the hand and goes out to find and catch Pokemon together. Blake tells her that he wants to get better acquainted with her and make her feel at home, to which her Fungi wasn't having any of that and attacks Blake with his sweet scent. Blake dodges it by doing a backflip, and Whitley's impressed as to how coordinated he is. The sweet scent lures a Pokemon, and when Blake makes Whiteley turn on her Pokedex to scan it, they learn that it's Keldeo. Yeah, back-to-back mythical encounters for Blake. It's kinda crazy, but without any hesitation, Keldeo attacks it to and sends him flying off a cliff. Luckily, Blake manages to catch Whiteley and grabs onto some vines, but Fungi fell all the way down, and Whiteley wants to go get it. As Blake takes her down, she passes out, and we cut to a short backstory on how Whiteley met Fungi when she was just 10, how she had mistaken Fungi for a Pokeball, and how she valued and looked up to N even back then, as his ideals are all she could rely on. After she learns that Fungus is a Pokemon and not a Pokeball, she was instructed to take care of it the way she would any other Pokemon, but proceeds to give it a nickname. She's told that she can't give Pokemon nicknames because it'll be harder to separate from them once they release them into the wild. And while she understands this, 2 years later, she's still calling the Pokemon Fungi. We see Blake look at her with some caution and suspicion, but he approaches Fungi in a friendly manner and gets his cooperation to help Whiteley. And that's when the audience reading and the characters in the manga both get their next
dose of shipping material as Blake carries Whiteley back to the class in his arms, and all the other 3 girls see and get jealous. One of them even faints herself. Sharon is confused on what happened, and Blake basically says that they got attacked, but it's no big deal and that he's gonna take her to the nurse. While Whiteley's eyes begin to open and she sees a part of N in Blake, she sees how even though Blake is injured, he's able to smile and be around Pokemon, just like N. And as Whiteley realizes that she's falling down a slippery slope, she comes back to her senses, wakes up, and tells Blake that she'll go get herself a checkup. Blake, on the other hand, debriefs with his Dewott and is really interested in Keldeo and its determination. Meanwhile, Dewott points out how not once has Whiteley kept Fungus instead of a Pokeball, and that raises suspicions for both of them. Boy, it's a good thing that Ash wasn't enrolled into the school. The next week, the school takes a trip to Pokestar Studio, and Blake makes it a point to sit beside Whitley and be around her, getting the other girls jealous again. And he's appointed Looker to keep an eye out on them as well. Blake is persistent in speaking to her, but Whiteley expresses discomfort in being around him, and Fungi is also protecting her in whatever way it can. The class makes it to Pokestar Studio, and Whiteley immediately bolts away from Blake and joins up with the other girls. And while they all want to act in the movie in Pokestar, Whiteley doesn't, and Sabrina appears and sees this and gets her to act in the movie instead. The movie begins, and Fungus Girl is going up against Bryson Man, and we see Whiteley have a lot of fun behind the mask, and her Fungus is even able to easily knock Bryson's poniard. Bryson Man tries to retaliate when one of the props of the studio goes ballistic and attacks Fungus Girl. As everything is going haywire, the director tries to cut the show, but Bryson insists on keeping the film rolling as he sees none other than the hero of truth and ideals. Dewott Kid rises from above and comes down with a vigorous save, leading to Whiteley once again falling in Blake's arms, and she once again is shown to be uncomfortable. And we even get to see that in the final product of the movie that was shown across Unova. Pokedex holders, movie stars, potential lovers, yeah, these two have quite the history together in a matter of a week's time. The class discusses how Pokestar Studio was developed by a girl just a bit older than the kids, someone who's the same age as Sharon, and we of course learn that this is White, who will let Bryson borrow her Vullaby, which, by the way, though the story has been all sunshine and rainbows so far, it's about to take a drastic tonal shift, and you probably have heard me mention a few references to the black and white manga without covering it in this video. And the reason for that is because I have a whole 1-hour video covering the events of the black and white manga, as well as the shipping between the characters of black and white, and you should definitely check that out because without going into too many spoilers, their love story isn't done until Black 2 and White 2 is over. And if you don't already know what kind of cliffhanger ending we were left with in that series, then you definitely want to go check that out now and come back and continue with this video, because we will be going over major black and white spoilers from here on out. And also, subscribe if you want to see more manga videos like this one, because I got a lot more coming out soon. Once the class arrives back at the trainer school, we see the story shift towards Hugh for a bit, where the girls of the class are getting at Hugh for not understanding girls when he has a little sister, and how his little sister must hate to have a brother like him. This triggers Hugh for some reason, and he gets his Vibrava to use Sonic Boom on the girls to get them to scram. Leo stops him, but as the girls run off, he notices that one of them dropped a pendant, and from the pendant comes his little memory card. Back at their dorm, Leo is questioning Hugh as to his relationship with his sister, and he brushes it aside, and is more concerned about getting the memory card back to whoever lost it, so he reluctantly checks the content of the card to see if it has any clues of who it may belong to. And that's when he comes to the grave realization that the contents of the card are the Pokemon that Team Plasma liberated 5 years ago. And not just that, we cut to a backstory of how Hugh met Purloin and how he even gifted it to his sister on her birthday because of how deeply he cared for her. Meanwhile, we see Team Plasma beginning to form during this time, and this was the start of Team Plasma. And soon after both of these events, we see Team Plasma go out and liberate Hugh's sister's Purloin. Not only did they steal a Pokemon that meant so much to Hugh and his sister, but this is what causes the shift in Hugh's personality and causes him to pursue strength. And on top of this, to make matters worse, when we cut to real time, Hugh realizes that not only is this a record of a massive theft from Team Plasma, but this theft, this liberation, all started with his sister's Purloin, and that one of the girls in the class are a member of Team Plasma, and he won't let it go until he gets to the bottom of it. Colress is shown to be working alongside Ghetsis, and he reveals the Neo Team Plasma grunt suits, and they begin moving forward with finding Zinzalin. This was all one whole volume, by the way, and Black 2 and White 2 has 4 volumes, the last volume having the longest chapter in the Adventure series. Volume 2 starts off with Whiteley dreaming of N and running up to him and hugging him, when all of a sudden N starts talking about how Whiteley realizes how he finally feels about her. Except
it's not N. It turns out to be a really tall version of Blake, who even tries to go in for a kiss. She screams and wakes up all the other girls in her dorm, only to realize that it was all just a dream. Or a nightmare, as she would call it. But apparently, a dream reveals the secrets of your heart. And in her dream, Blake was dazzling. And Whiteley finally starts to think that she might actually have feelings for him. But upon those feelings, she feels guilty because the only one that she truly loves is N. And when she goes to grab her pendant to talk to N and tell him that he's the only one she ever wanted to be with, she scrambles because she realizes that she lost the pendant. And she blames herself as she feels like she's being punished as it's karma for dreaming of another boy. Yeah, to whoever's watching this, I hope you understand this is just like a kid being a kid. You should never feel guilty about something as stupid as this. The school begins preparing for this choir tournament that they have, and Hugh is in a rage with the girls and suspicious of all of them. Meanwhile, Blake takes to Whiteley to go grab equipment to help with the tournament, and Whiteley can't stop thinking about Blake or her dream. Her heart is even shown to be being faster and faster. And to make matters worse, it turns out that the real reason as to why Blake took her aside was to give her a birthday present in private. Whiteley claims that she can't take a present from him as they don't have that kind of relationship, referencing to the events that took place in her dream. But Blake says that they don't need any kind of relationship for her to accept a gift from him. But anyways, she can accept it after he deals with Tornadus. Again, going back to the black and white manga, the legendary genies were captured by Team Plasma. Logan and Blake caught wind of Team Plasma being near this route, and Blake decided to bring Whiteley along to see if he can get a reaction out of her when they confront one of the Seven Sages. And while Tornadus is seen shifting into both of his forms, Blake also has a secret weapon on his team, Keldeo. After his encounter with it in the last volume, he went to approach it and realized that Keldeo's friends were lost. So in order to help it master Secret Sword and help it save its friends, Blake asked it to join his team in exchange for its help. By the way, if you haven't noticed by now, Blake's team consists of Pokemon with the weapon motif: a sword, a cannon, and I guess a scallop. They eventually end up stopping Neo Team Plasma, who is controlling the genies, and capture one of the Seven Sages, who is being attacked by the genies for being on the other side of Team Plasma. When Blake went to go see Whiteley's reaction, Fungus had already put her to sleep so that Blake wouldn't see it. But when they ask Galileo if they know her, he says no. So Blake proceeds with the next step of his plan: a date. Blake takes an unconscious Whiteley to Roxy's concert, and somehow she only gently wakes up after the music starts blasting. Don't know how he managed to take her all the way to a concert like that, but okay. She herself is confused by everything. Blake does have another plan, and this time it's for the school, and that's to get Roxy to come to the school festival as a special guest. Turns out they were able to convince her to come because she saw the two of them on the big screen, and their film was so good that it killed Roxy's dad's dreams of becoming a film star and got him to return as the sea captain, which apparently reunited the family. I don't think this is something to be celebrating either, but it's Pokemon. After the concert, Whiteley's in the school nurse office just recovering and gets a present from Blake. She doesn't want to take it, but since the wrapping is already open, she sees that he gifted her a telescope. He gifted her this because he remembered that her hobby is stargazing, and to this, Whiteley is just simply touched. The school choir tournament begins and Hugh's sister attends, which gets Hugh on his best behavior. And it also gets Leo to have a love story of his own. Bianca's on the side reminiscing about Black and how he used to cheer just like how the classes of the choir tournament are now cheering, and decides to hold back her tears because she knows that White is in more pain than anyone else is. Roxy attends the tournament just like she promised, and Whiteley thinks to herself that she's not special or anything, and that Blake is just genuinely a nice and caring person, and he's like this to everyone. As their class reaches the finals of the choir tournament, they begin losing, but Blake has Duat come in with an assist with its scallop, and man, is it nice to see Blake and Duat just have some fun. And with this fun, they manage to win the tournament, and Roxy is so impressed by the performance that she decides to ask her dad to take the whole class to Castelia City as a fun little class trip. But this trip is anything but fun, as Blake takes advantage of this trip to start a mission to arrest 2 of the 7 sages. But it goes beyond that. Hugh's sisters onboard the boat in secrecy, and Hugh asks Leo to make sure that no one knows that she's there, as it's a secret, and he wants her to have fun in Castelia City. But the moment they arrive there, they see a man on the ground unconscious with blood on his forehead? Actually, just mucus from muck, but it's a good way to mask a scene like this. When asked what happened, the man says that he got attacked by 2 masked people who ended up kidnapping his Carablast, and those 2 people end up stating that they're liberating his Pokemon. Roxy, Hugh, Whiteley, and Blake all immediately recognize that this is Team Plasma, and all 4 of them want to go take care of this mess in the sewers, with Hugh entrusting Leo to take care of his sister. Everyone is going for their own agenda. Hugh for revenge, Whiteley to find N, Roxy for a noble cause, and for Blake, he recognizes that there are too many people for his mission to go well. Blake does catch wind of Whiteley joining the group though, and puts her on spot and asks her as to why she decided to tag along, to which Hugh interrupts and ends the conversation as they're attacked by Team Plasma members and forced to split up. Looker joins the fray and saves Hugh and also lets him know that there is international police work at hand, asking him to cooperate. Roxy and Whiteley together take care of all the Team Plasma grunts, and Whiteley, in shock as how this new Team Plasma is operating, has no choice but to call her mother. Blake makes quick work and captures the 2 sages he was after and proceeds further as he realizes that something is amiss, and it's way too cold down where they are, and the only Pokemon that can cause this level of cold is Kira. And right he is, as Colress is with Zinzalin in his crushes, and Zinzalin already had Kira in his hands 2 years ago. Colress ends up fighting for it and eventually gets it under his control, while Blake is stopped by the legendary genies and has to use the rest of his team to fight them off to get to Colress. Whiteley, on the other hand, is speaking to her mother about the new Team Plasma, while Fungi's making sure that Roxy doesn't eavesdrop, and their mother reveals the truth about the new Team Plasma, their origins, and how they oppose N. She also mentions this new group chose Colress as the leader, and that the old Team Plasma caught wind of them working on the Colress machine, the same machine that controlled Genesect from earlier. But this time, the same machine can control all the Pokemon. Luckily, the old Team Plasma created something to neutralize the device if it ever came down to it, and the data of it was saved on the memory card that for some reason they entrusted to a little girl at the end of the last series. And that same girl 2 years later now is in shock because she lost it. Regardless, Whiteley quickly takes ownership of her mistake and vows to find it. Whiteley tries to go back to her class, realizing that one of her classmates might actually have the pendant, and to her horror, Hugh tells everyone that Team Plasma is back and starts to alert everyone to them. He even goes as far as telling the class that he knows that one of the girls from his class are from Team Plasma. His classmates don't believe him and try to say that he's making things up. Even Charon is confused. To this, Hugh doesn't think twice and decides to leave the school to pursue Team Plasma, as he thought that they disbanded 2 years ago. But since he knows that they're around now, he won't let anything stop him. Charon does try and stop him, but to no avail. And when his classmates questions how he even knows that one of the girls are from Team Plasma, he pulls out the pendant as evidence for his claims, and we see both Charon and Whiteley react to it. The class only now caught wind of Whiteley's disappearance, and when she returns, she confronts Hugh straight up. Everyone is in disbelief and questioning whether she went up as a member of Team Plasma or not, but nobody but Hugh will know, because in her panic, she uses Fungi to put everyone to sleep, leading to Hugh finally confronting an ex-member of Team Plasma. Meanwhile, Blake is in a fight using Keldeo against Colress and Kyurem when Ghetsis finally reveals himself and tells Blake that he can't allow him to interfere in his plans. And as he says that, Ghetsis gets ready to freeze Unova. While this is happening, the Shadow Trio come out and Keldeo gets PTSD, as the Shadow Trio were the ones who earlier petrified the Swords of Justice. Keldeo stops listening to Blake, and with all of Blake's other Pokemon in other battles, Blake has no choice but to recall Keldeo and take matter into his own hands as a spy. Hugh is relentless with Whitley, demanding answers at once, and when he isn't happy with them, he even gets a little rough and physical with her as he thinks Whitley is lying with everything she's saying. Whitley tries to calmly tell Hugh, who demands to be taken to the rest of Team Plasma, that she no longer is a part of Team Plasma, and that the Team Plasma that she knew weren't bad people. They were all people who tried their best to genuinely look out and care for Pokemon. But since then, she herself has met a different side of the same team, and to that, Whiteley apologizes to Hugh. Hugh, while is still demanding, asks more calmly to be taken to the house where Whiteley used to live with the other Team Plasma members. And as Hugh is dragging her by the hand, the two are alerted to the commotion of the citizens of Castelia City. Ghetsis and Colress from their ship fire the freeze ray, which Hugh quickly catches wind of and actually manages to save both him and Whiteley from it, while knocking himself unconscious. To Whiteley's horror, she sees all the citizens of Castelia City frozen. That's when Sage Rod appears, the sage that Whitley used to live with, the one who gave her the pendant in the first place. Sage Rod talks to Whitley about finding the locket, and the two head out for Hesperida City to revive her from Hugh's room. Whitley doesn't want to leave her classmates behind like that, so Sage Rude and the other members take care of the children, while Enzora makes a return here and takes Whiteley's place as herself. That way, the students won't suspect a thing, or so he says. Unfortunately, this plan is quickly changed as Ghetsis and Colress realize that Sage Rod is down there, and as punishment for going against them, they decide to capture him. But Whiteley saves him, taking his place instead, while Sage Rod is left with Hugh. HQ. Blake is aboard the ship investigating when he hears Whiteley be captured, and with this, he sees an opportunity. Blake pretends to be thrown into the same jail cell as her, and since it's only them two alone in an empty room, Blake seizes the opportunity. Not for romance, but to corner her. He questions her and questions her and questions her to the point of discomfort, asking for many details the way an investigator would. And Whiteley sees a totally different Blake than the charming young boy that she knew, and even begins to suspect him to be the international police that Sage Rod mentioned earlier. And as she thinks about this possibility, all of the sweet memories and feelings that she had with him suddenly turn into horror, as she begins to realize that if he really is what she fears him to be, everything she experienced with him, the bond and feelings that they shared, were a lie. A lie only for Blake to get closer to her, to arrest her. And with one single slip up from her mouth, as Blake presses further and further, he does exactly that with no remorse. And he finally reveals himself to be a member of the International Police. Whiteley understandably is all over the place when Blake tells her to calm down, as he has no intention of arresting her, but he does want her cooperation. When Whiteley asks when he suspected her of being a part of Team Plasma, he tells her straight that it was from the beginning of when she entered the school. And she, in pain, turns away and asks if it was because he wanted to investigate her that he has always been talking to her and helping her. And while she doesn't say it, within herself, she brings up her most fond memory of him, giving her the telescope. And to all of this, Blake shows no emotion back when he replies with a simple yes. This part of the manga is incredibly tough to read because the poor girl's emotions and heart are just breaking apart. Forget the romantic stuff. This is just straight betrayal. When Fungi tries to attack Blake, Whiteley holds Fungi back and tells him that she will cooperate. You see her body language not be so warm and open anymore, but she decides to do what she thinks is right. Blake's missions are to stop the 7 sages and to retrieve the same memory card that Whiteley lost. When Blake questions Whiteley about the memory card, she responds with care and consideration about Kira, to which Blake is thrown off about. Whiteley tells Blake just as directly that she will help him save Kira, and after that, and only after that, will she help him find the memory card. For the first time ever, these two are both unmasked in front of each other. And while their relationship with one another is completely different, they're driven to complete the same mission. The two star on board the ship, and while the tone is a lot more serious with their masks off, we do get a few fun moments like Blake being impressed by Fungi, or even a small shipping moment with Blake putting Whiteley's hands over his waist. I mean, I know it's for safety, but I feel like it was added in there just to lighten things up a bit. Blake uses Genesect and Keldeo to take care of Team Plasma members when Genesect's drive gets burnt up, causing it enormous damage, leaving Blake to only rely on Keldeo once again, because the rest of his Pokemon are still outside. And when they go to confront Kira attacks them under the control of Colress and manages to freeze Keldeo. Blake has no choice but to call Genesect, but Whiteley stops him, as if Blake does use Genesect, it could implode on itself the way it is right now, showing her care and compassion to all Pokemon. With Blake thinking of his other options, Colress makes quick work of them and freezes them together, sending all their frozen bodies off to the bottom of the sea. Colress explains that his next goal is Absolution, which of course needs either Zekrom or Reshiram to make it happen. And with this, we finally get to see N and Zekrom in the series, chasing after a soaring Lightstone with Black trapped inside it. Now before we continue, I need to make mention that the rest of this video is going to be quite choppy. Not because I've given up on the script or anything or gotten lazy, it's because the story itself gets this way. If you recall, I mentioned earlier how the Black 2 and White 2 manga took 7 years to complete, and that's no exaggeration. Black 2 and White 2's first volume came out in Japan on December 26, 2014. Its second volume, August 8, 2017. The third volume came out on May 28 in 2020. And the final volume, which we're going to blur the cover of, also came out on May 28 in 2020. Do you know when the first volume of the Black and White volume came out? January 25th, 2013. And with there being 9 volumes in total of the first Black and White series, do you know when the last volume of the series came out? July 25th, 2014. A year and a half for a 9-volume series. So why was Black 2 and White 2 extended for a whole 7-year journey? And why is it important to know for this video? Well, you see, there's a lot of different aspects to this, but it mainly comes down to this. Adventures, even though it's one self-contained story, still has to play off the marketing of the main games in this series. Everything revolves around the marketing of what's happening for Pokemon, and when Black 2 and White 2 came out, it was an interesting time. Because very soon afterwards, we end up getting X and Y,
if you remember, by the time Black 2 and White 2 came out, people were wondering why this was on the DS and not the 3DS. That's how late the timing of these games were at that time. This is also the first direct sequel game, which of course, the writers of the black and white manga didn't know that would be happening, so they had to kind of think of a way and come up with a way to shoehorn a sensible story into the events of the first black and white manga to make it all flow together by the last chapter. Unfortunately, by the time of the Black 2 and White 2 manga, the writers had to swap over and work on the X and Y manga, because the X and Y games had already been released by this point, as their chapter came out on April 18th, 2014, even before the first Black 2 and White 2 chapter. As the story continued, other projects and mangas continued to stockpile. Pokemon games began to get released faster and faster, and the Black 2 and White 2 manga was perpetually pushed to the side. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Again, there was much more than this with stricter rules, artist issues, and other things, but for the sake of this video, you need to understand that when an author or a writer has to delay a story like this, or just keep it on the back burner, chances are you're gonna forget things. Even Oda forgets things in One Piece and has to refer to the One Piece wiki to remember things about the series, so you can bet that things were forgotten in Adventures. Not only were things forgotten, but it was rushed, if that makes any sense, to get finished, because people are waiting for an ending for so long, which is why the third and fourth volume came out at the same time. The author of the story has even gone on record basically saying that the ending to Black 2 and White 2 was rushed in a very polite way without blaming it on anybody, but yeah, it was rushed. So what does that really mean? Well, it means that for an otherwise incredibly enjoyable series, the last two volumes of Black 2 and White 2 are a convoluted mess that have way too much going on at once, with way too many characters coming in from both the original and sequel series. So while these two videos have been able to summarize the majority of the manga till now, going forward for the rest of this video, we're only going to be focusing on the characters of Black, White, and Blake and Whiteley, because our love triangle might turn into a love hourglass as there are two different love triangles going on. Or the fans will like to think so anyways. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about Hugh, but no romance there, he's too edgy for that. After 2 years of searching, White and friends end up finding the Lightstone at the center of it all, the Enderlink, and as soon as White obtains it, N descends down with Zekrom, leading to their first confrontation in 2 years as well. White is shocked to see them and is immediately on guard as she sends out all of her Pokemon, but through their response, she's able to hear them convey that N and Zekrom won't attack. N is pleased and is glad that he entrusted some of his Pokemon to her. White is confused with emotions. She's confused as to why Black and Reshiram were the only ones who turned into stone, and doesn't understand why the same didn't happen with N and Zekrom. N isn't aware, but N is following Zekrom's wishes, and Zekrom wants to go to cure him with the Lightstone. So it picks up both White and N and heads off. N tells White that Ghetsis has Kyurem and is freezing Unova, and while he knows that Ghetsis wants Zekrom to perform Absolution with Kyurem, Zekrom is anyways drawn to it, and N himself wants to prove that his mind has been free from Team Plasma, and that he has no intention of harming Unova again. And so, the only goal he has now is to stop his father. Oh, and also, N reveals that he's been chasing down the Lightstone, but Black, being the lover boy that he is, even while being in the Lightstone, immediately stopped in place for White the moment he noticed her from the stone. And you can even see the stone blushing. Colress and Ghetsis see N approaching, and Colress tells Ghetsis not to hold back because of some parental affection or something, to which Ghetsis replies saying that he never had any parental affection. Father and son duke it out, and N realizes that when Kyurem absorbs Zekrom, the Lightstone will revert back into Reshiram. N tells White to tell Black to take care of the rest. The two clash, leading to a classic explosion. Meanwhile, Blake and Keldeo wake up at the Abyssal Ruins, and somehow these ruins have the power to allow people to hear the voices of Pokemon. It's revealed that right before Keldeo got frozen, Blake anticipated this and gave it an Asper Berry to hold, and through the voices of Keldeo's frozen mentors, it was guided to the Abyssal Ruins. Keldeo wants to save them, and Blake realizes since the three were frozen through a Technoblast, the only way to free them is to thaw them with a Technoblast. Keldeo begins to worry about Genesect, and so does Whiteley. That's when Blake realizes that their handcuffs have come loose, to which both Whiteley and Keldeo say they didn't do anything to them. Blake asks why she didn't escape, besides, being submerged somewhere in the middle of the ocean. She says that she cannot abandon someone who's in need of help, no matter who they are. Keldeo even says that she was rubbing his body since he was cold, and since that wasn't working, she went to go find something warm for him. That's how nice she is. Whiteley asks why Blake would want to do something so cruel, like risk having an explosion with Genesect, to which Blake nonchalantly asks what's so cruel about it. Whiteley is stone-faced, but Blake explains that it's the most effective method, and if Genesect is injured, he can just heal it. Fear and sympathy are emotions that he'll never understand because he himself doesn't understand emotions. Whiteley and Keldeo stand in horror as Blake commands a Technoblast, and as he does, Keldeo Keldio's in tears as his mentors are finally saved. As there's a quad weak fire going on in Genesect's back, Cobalion saves Genesect immediately from that super effective recoil and tells Keldeo that it must not hesitate and it should trust itself for choosing this human as its master and have the resolve to follow him. When Blake tries to log in the International Police database, he finds out that he's been fired. Early in this volume, we find out it's because he took Genesect without permission. And since Blake is stuck, Looker has to be the one to retrieve his Duat, Gliscor, and Kabutops. But this gives Blake no access to any other Pokemon aside from his own, and no International Police gadgets either. Blake tries to formulate a plan while Whiteley speaks to the Swords about why they think Keldeo should trust or go with Blake, especially when he doesn't exhibit emotion. To which Cobalion asks if Whiteley wants to save Kyurem, to which she of course says yes. Cobalion says that fear and sympathy are not needed for that, and that Blake's strong will and calm judgment is what they need right now, and then afterwards they can see if they should trust Blake or not. Convinced, Whiteley decides to see if Blake needs any help, and it turns out that he does. And how can it be Whiteley if she isn't in shock or horror every 2 seconds? Because Blake asks her to catch a Pokemon, to which she obviously protests and hesitates, but Fungi does the work for her and catches a Karrablast, while Blake catches a Shelmet. The two then trade and now have Excelgor and Escavalier respectively, completing Blake's weapon team. Whiteley learns more about the two Pokemon from the Pokedex and realizes that the Pokedex can be a tool to help Pokemon, similar to what they were trying to convey to N in the last series. The Swords decide it's time to go, seeing as how the Abyssal Ruins is about to kick them out, and Whiteley thanks them for all that they taught her in this time of being able to talk to each other, and they proceed to head straight to the battle with Kyurem. As they're heading up to the surface, we see an orb in Blake's bag shine, and we learn that he's had this mysterious orb since he was a baby, while touching upon his backstory of being an orphan who was raised by the International Police, all the while going into his lack of understanding emotions and why he approaches everything logically. As Whiteley learns that he's been relieved of being an inspector, she questions why he's still helping Kyurem, and Blake explains that he doesn't know the difference between right and wrong, and smiles as he says that he follows what he's been taught, as that's the only way of living that he knows. Suddenly, the orb pulls Blake away from Keldeo and Whiteley, and he flies right on over to the scene of the crime, directly to Kyurem as it's facing Zekrom. And to everyone's surprise, it turns out that Blake had the DNA splices with him since he was a baby. Keldeo rushes into the water to save Blake, and Team Plasma takes advantage of the newly obtained DNA splicers and activates it to absorb Zekrom. And as Zekrom is once again turned into the Darkstone, N is engulfed in it the same way Black was, as White is left in horror, witnessing the same despair happen 2 years later. The Lightstone reacts to Zekrom's absence and drags White forward to Kyurem and begins to glow, and as the glow gets stronger, White doesn't fall like how Blake did, but rather is caught by none other than N. You thought I was gonna say Black, didn't you? Well, don't worry, because we're getting really close to that. After the shipping panel, White learns that when N and Black got taken inside their respective stones, they went to the land where Pokemon sleep, the dream world, which makes sense because technically Reshiram and Zekrom are asleep in these states. And if N is there, then that of course means that Black is there too. And after 2 long years, or again, 7 if you're reading the manga, we finally see him scream from the top of his lungs, as he always does, talking about his plan to stop Kyurem. And as White is frozen and overwhelmed with emotion, Black just continues rambling on about his plans and apologizing to White for dragging her into this, as he's too embarrassed and too in love to turn around and face her. But luckily, he doesn't have to, as unknowingly to him, White just runs up to him and hugs him from behind. In one of the most wholesome panels ever in the history of the series, she welcomes him back, and he states that he's just glad to be back. Of course, this reunion can't be entirely with this moment, as they're still in the middle of fighting Ghetsis, who's using Black Kyurem to wreak havoc. Black and White decide to go to the real world, while N stays back and tries to deal damage from inside. And when the two decide to jump outside, Black tells White to not let go of his hand. White tells him that she won't let go of it, and that she will never let go, leading to a very iconic panel between the two. And when the two land back in reality, White doesn't see Black and thinks it's all a dream. But turns out that he immediately just got ready for battle, as always, and the two fight Ghetsis together with a tremendous display of coordination even 2 years later. But as the two are attacking, Ghetsis throws N at Kyurem as a hostage so that Reshiram couldn't deliver the final blow, leading to Ghetsis' counterattack, defeating Reshiram. And on top of this, Ghetsis looks down on N, initially with a bit of remorse. Afterwards, he strikes him down, stating that he didn't think that N could be this worthless, and sends him to the ocean as well. Black and White go to save him and Reshiram, but the Frigate causes a blizzard that obscures their vision and causes causes them to disappear alongside N. Meanwhile, the two-spot restaurant with the Swords of Justice and unconscious Blake and Whiteley. White recognizes them as Doo-Wop Kid and Fungus Girl and explains to Black how they're students and Pokedex holders from Charon's class, which Black is confused by all of this since he's been gone for 2 years, but White tells him that she will explain later. That's when we find out that Blake wasn't really unconscious and tries to get the upper hand on both White and Black. Black gets angry at Blake for laying a hand on White, but he pretty much beats him, and Blake just explains the current situation to them, all the while revealing that he knows almost everything about them. Black and White are annoyed by Blake's personality, but Blake explains that they all have a common goal of destroying Team Plasma and freeing Kyurem from the control. Blake provokes Black once more about how he's not doing what he should already be doing, and so Black decides to take action by getting his Musharna to perform his signature move one last time. Musha eats Black's dream so that Black can get a clear picture of what he needs to do. And somehow, this is exactly when Fugi decides to jump on Whiteley and try to wake her up. And as Whiteley is waking up to a very concerned Fugi, she also wakes up to the sight of Musharna eating Black's head off. Whiteley is freaking out and tries to save Black, but both White and Blake explain to Whiteley that this is just a part of Black's strategy. As White is impressed with the amount of knowledge that Blake knows about them, Whiteley realizes that Blake isn't such a bad guy, and she's shown to be very relieved by this. But Blake, being emotionally incompetent, comes out with the wrong response. And as that happens, Black comes forward with his deductions to defeat Kyurem, and the group realizes that their final battle is going to be a giant chasm. White heals everyone up, and the group is getting ready to go, but Whiteley is reluctant to head off with them. But Cobalion kind of forces her to go. Black says that it must really trust her because Black almost got screwed by it before. Though Whiteley is already running to White for comfort like she's her big sister, this is where Black and White formally introduce themselves to her and where she realizes that N is back. She was initially worried that he met his end, but the group realizes that he must have been captured, so Whiteley starts to take the lead and says that they have to go to the Frigate immediately. Obviously say then, but she's not telling them that. As the group is flying on top of Reshiram, Whiteley is incredibly nervous about N's well-being, to which White grabs her hand and tries to comfort her and asks her about her dream. When Whiteley thinks about it, her face lights up and she tells them that it's a world where Pokemon can live as they want without getting hurt, even if it's with humans. White tells her that if she's ever scared, think about that dream, and to live today to the best of her ability. White herself was scared for the past 2 years and was overwhelmed with worry and despair, but she took her time and did what she could, just making an effort one day at a time. As she turns her head to Black, she states that after all this, her dream finally came true. White gives Whiteley some words of encouragement, and her spirits are fully back up, and she thanks Black, White, Reshiram, and even Blake as they head off for their real final battle. After this point, it's a barrage of side characters and their stories as we mentioned earlier. Almost everyone returns, even side characters like Benga, who didn't have a proper introduction at all, except for this scene during this final battle. Elisa and Skylar return due to fan service, Owler comes back with Drayden, Iris returns as a champion, so many things happen, but all we need to know for this video is that Black and White take on Ghetsis alongside the side characters who joined them, and Blake takes on Colress alongside his Genesect, facing Colress's very own shiny Genesect, and pretty much every single Univin legendary and mythical Pokemon entered this fight, even White Kyurem after Black's Reshiram got absorbed by Kyurem. Heck, the only way Blake beat Colress is because Victini gave Blake the Blessings of Victory as a token of gratitude for Black and White helping it in the previous manga. So many things happen, but Whiteley isn't really a part of this. Whiteley is on a mission to save N alongside Gigi, and Hugh is a big part of this mission as well. As earlier, Hugh had met up with Sage Rod, and while Hugh was hostile at first, Hugh begins to trust Sage Rod, and even protects him and meets up with Whiteley's mother to serve his sister's purloin. And so, he's aboard the Frigate at the same time Whiteley is. And when Whiteley encounters Hugh on the ship, Whiteley braces herself for an emotional guilt trip that she's not ready for. But to her surprise, Hugh actually comes down and is super friendly and properly apologizes to her for everything, saying that he knows that she's not a part of the Team Plasma that he had a problem with, and that he even met her mother and all. But when he says that he's going after N, Whiteley once again gets scared, leading to Hugh having to explain to her that he has no intentions of hurting him or anything, and just has his sister's purloin, and so he wants to find him. And we see the two share a soft moment together. Hugh and Whiteley team up to find N, and they very quickly locate him. And when Hugh goes to tell Whiteley that he completed his part of the mission, he is left in secondhand embarrassment as he sees the most romanticized panel of the series, of White looking upon N like he's the beauty and she's the beast. It really looks like they're about to kiss or something. She even starts to call out his name and takes her hand to touch his his face. But thankfully, Gigi prevents all of that by pouncing on N to wake him up first. Hugh sees this and begins to laugh, and even Gigi gives Whiteley the side eye and a smirk, so everyone knows about Whiteley's love for N, and they all tease her for it. Even Fungi plays around a little bit and teases N about Whiteley. Hugh can't control his laughter, but when things get serious, the three compose themselves and Hugh decides to stay back to fight the Team Plasma grunts, while Whiteley and N find a way to help stop Ghetsis. It's here that Fungi decides to play the assist of a lifetime. It tells Hugh that it'll stay back and support him in case he was in any danger, and once they've won, Hugh and Fungi can catch up to N and Whiteley. Fungi then proceeds to command N to protect Whiteley while it's away, and Whiteley is upset at Fungi for being rude, but little does she know that Fungi was on her side the whole time, as N grabs and holds Whiteley's hand to protect her like Fungi said, and you can even see Whiteley gushing at the jester later on. Yeah, that girl is on a different planet with her love. They meet up with Alder and Looker, and to Whiteley's surprise, N and Alder have a strong bond now, with N even calling him Grandpa. Black and White take care of things outside, and our group of 5 here take care of things inside, eventually resulting in an explosion on the ship. And while all of our characters are okay, Ghetsis is falling off to his demise, but N calls out to his father and catches him from falling. N tries to help Ghetsis, and Ghetsis asks N if he still calls him father. N explains that of course he does, and further explains why, and that he's still incredibly grateful to him, and still loves him despite everything, and that no matter what, he will always be his father. And while Ghetsis seems moved at first, nothing could prepare me for the panel that was about to come up next, as Ghetsis slashes N's face across with his cane. Whiteley is in shock, and Ghetsis keeps going in rage, telling N that he is not his father. N gets beaten and bloody to the point where he can't hold his father anymore, and Ghetsis falls to his demise, laughing as if he gets the final laugh on N. But that laughing comes to a pause when Zekrom catches Ghetsis from falling, and we see that Ghetsis rather have fallen than be saved by N. After this fight, Unova is in peril as there's a fire consuming N's castle that just won't stop, and so even at the cost of cutting Bianca and Black and Charon's reunion, Blake gets all the starter users to come together as 9 trainers have one stage of each of the 3 Uniman starters, and together they launch a full-fledged grass, fire, and water pledge combo, stopping the fire and saving all of Unova. We see Looker's respect for Blake as an inspector despite being fired. He still reports to Blake in whatever way he can and confirms the arrest of Ghetsis. And when our protagonists finally confront Ghetsis, Black tells Ghetsis it's the end of his ideal and his dreams. Ghetsis tells Black that he's just as bad as him because in order for one to dream, someone else has to be destroyed. White tells Ghetsis that Ghetsis may have thought that that's what a dream is, and that some dreams may be cruel, but if it comes at the cost of deceiving others and crushing their hopes, then it's not a dream, it's ambition. Ghetsis is amused at the mentality of the herd, and is already long awaiting the day where the people turn to him again and welcome him with open arms. And while Blake says nothing, Whiteley surprisingly speaks up and says that even if Ghetsis can fool humans again, the Pokemon will never ever forget, and they will never ever forgive him, or let him escape like he's doing today. To which Ghetsis stares into the eyes of the Pokemon, realizing that what Whiteley was saying was true. He breaks down, with that being the last of him that we see in the series. The series reaches its conclusion, and we see N and Black say goodbye to Reshiram and Zekrom, and we see Blake move forward alongside his crazy cool team, alongside his reinstatement to becoming an inspector, which, whether he realizes it or not, makes him quite happy, I think. We see Whiteley learn more about N's time with Alder and what all they went through in those 2 missing years. We see Charon's class apologize to Hugh, and Hugh shows his vulnerable side again and apologize to them. And Blake re-entered the class with everyone learning that White has basically hired Whiteley as an actress for her agency. But only temporarily, as Whiteley has a different purpose and motive with her life. And while Charon's class is graduating, we see Black wear the BW agency merch and tell Charon that he's apparently going to return as a student under him so that he can take on the league and beat Iris. We get to see that Blake is planning on leaving Unova here, and we also see Whiteley just staring blankly at him during this, when Hugh decides to call Whiteley and tell her that she doesn't need to take on such a difficult job of returning all of the stolen Pokemon with N. And while she doesn't say anything back, Hugh tells
tells her that if anyone blames her for anything, to call him so that he can prove her innocence. And as he walks away, Whiteley realizes that this was the very first time that Hugh actually called her by her name. Whiteley sees Blake walk past her, and she tells Blake that he's heard that he's become an ex-inspector, when Blake corrects her and says that he's actually just an inspector now. Whiteley is embarrassed by this, and to me, it looks like she might even be a little nervous, potentially even harboring some feelings for him still, and states that she should call him by his name the next time that she meets him somewhere, when Blake nonchalantly replies that the next time that they meet, his name will no longer be Blake, and that she probably won't even notice that it's him. When Whiteley is hit with the realization that no matter how hard she tries, Blake's heart is really close to emotions. Blake, however, does make one attempt to make her smile now, and tells her to call him by his name now, and not the next time that they meet, to which Whiteley swallows her realization and grabs his hand and calls him by his name one last time as they proceed with their graduation. We see the graduation commence and all the characters who witness it, which boasts all the members of our main crew. As we're hit with a bit of a time skip of maybe a few weeks or months, we see En and Whiteley try to return Fungi to its original trainer, who claims that he doesn't want it, and so Fungi tells En that Whiteley is his, and Whiteley rejoices as they get to be together. But Whiteley realizes Fungi's remark and starts to question things as we see Magician and Colorist, out of all people, walk by En and Whiteley. And when Magician turns to En and Whiteley, he prompts Colorist to say hello to them, when a disguised Blake tells Magician that they need to go. And as Gigi picks up on Blake's scent and Blake and Whiteley walk by each other, the story comes to its final end.